Hello, fellow travelers. Welcome to Respawn Station. My name is Kandula, and today, God damn it, I'm joined by Nick Sivak again. Can't believe it. Today, we're going to be talking about our favorite 7 out of 10 games. What that means, where will this conversation go? We'll find out later in this episode. Before that, a quick thing I just wanted to say, first of all, if you don't yet check us out over on Respawn Station TV, that's where we're uploading kind of our more focused YouTube content. You can find the shortened clips or shortened edits of our podcast there. So anything that kind of like, you might have missed in the main episode, we understand we can hit 2-3 hours sometimes. So if you want to just get bite-sized content that way, again, I say bite-sized, it's 20 minutes probably for an average one, but nevertheless,
bite-sized compared to a podcast.
Yes, exactly. And we have other kind of content on that coming to that channel that is new and on the horizon that I'm very excited about. But last episode, I talked about I addressed Sean Murray and I kind of directly kind of talked to the Hello Games team, thinking, why not? Let's just do it, because that's why the podcast is here for. Communicate with those developers that will never get the chance to talk to. That video has gained surprising amount of traction. So I am hoping, if you haven't yet watched it, go head over to Respawn Station TV, watch it, leave a like, and let's get this thing in front of Sean Murray. You know what I mean? We could do it. We got to get it to No Man's Sky. But with that said, Nick, it's time to ask ourselves a very important question. Did Nick beat Elden Ring?
Nick did beat Elden Ring.
Oh, snap. The DLC.
It was not without its struggle.
Oh, yeah?
That final boss is pretty brutal, not going to lie.
I know you had suggested that you were going to beat the game after the stream last week, and then I was like Friday or Saturday, I was like, oh, guys, look. Nick's playing Elden Ring still. I hope it's not. I hope it doesn't look bad.
Yeah, I don't think I actually ended up playing after the podcast the other week. I did finish it whenever I picked it up again, but sure. Yeah, that final boss is it's pretty brutal, and like unfortunately, like I stand by everything that I said last week on Shadow of the Erdtree. Like my thoughts haven't really changed on it after the final boss.
Sure.
But I will say the final boss was a little bit of like a disappointment for me specifically.
Not as cool as a dragon.
No, I don't want to like super get into spoilers, even though like people have been spoiling this thing like left and right. But yeah. The boss, while it's not a reused boss, it is a character we are familiar with. So like that was like kind of I was like, oh, we're just kind of doing this again.
I see.
When it popped up. They have a completely different moveset and everything, so like it's it's a different fight, and it's hard, but it just kind of didn't hit the same highs as some of the other bosses in the DLCs that are more unique. But yeah, the boss was just like I knew going in that it was going to be hard, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna be prepared to die a lot here, and it was probably like the first like 7 or 8 attempts. I still could only get like 1 hit in before dying. Like I was just like, all right, like time to settle in for the long haul here.
Right.
Eventually, I started getting to the point where I could like consistently get to the second phase, where there's like a cutscene transition basically to denote that.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'm getting a little bit better, but like every single time I'm getting to the second phase, I'm basically getting annihilated immediately, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, I can't even learn these new moves on this phase. Eventually, like 2 hours into this, I was like, okay, I'm starting to, break down a little bit here. And I don't have anything to prove, like I've said before. So in the base game of Elden Ring, I summoned help for Melania, and I summoned help here.
Yep.
And even after summoning real players to help, it was still like another 10 or 12 attempps before we actually were able to take it down.
Damn.
So
wow. Well, you did it though.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. I did.
At what cost?
All it took was a guy helping me that had a shield that could literally tank every attack. So.
Okay. Well, overall, I mean, do you stick by your thoughts that you kind of said in the last episode, or is there anything kind of you anything at all that you're like, maybe I'll put a pin in that, or go
Yeah,
back to it.
like I said, it's pretty much the same. Like it's a great expansion. It's well worth the money. The art direction and the the boss fights themselves are the main draw, like most Souls games.
Yeah.
Uh, but also like most Souls games and Elden Ring, it's just more of what you've come to expect and love. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't really go super far outside of established norms. I mean, there's little things here and there that like I don't want to spoil because they are cool, but it's like little expectation diversions, not like anything like super massive, I would say, that you haven't seen in the games before.
Gotcha.
Like they might like to dance around it vaguely. They might like take away something that you're very used to using for like an area or like
Mm.
a a dungeon or something like that. So there's little things like that that kind of catch you off guard and make you think like, oh, that's an interesting twist. But like, it's rarely anything that's just like, oh, this is dramatically different than what I expected. Which again, for an expansion for a game, yeah, I guess it really shouldn't do that. But it basically it expands on the things you want it to expand on, and it's fun. It's hard, but like I said last week, that's pretty much what you come to From Software
Yeah, I
nowadays,
mean,
anyway.
I haven't even. Yeah, I've not gotten close to that series really, or that any of those games. But I could have.
Hmm.
I think that's part of the package. Yeah, you gotta have
Right.
it. You gotta expect it going in. Here's a fun fact. I'm not, obviously we don't talk about it too much, but I was recently out for lunch with one of my coworkers, and obviously, like I'm known for being a gamer. Hell yeah, you know what I mean. I'm a gamer, Nick. And so we had talked in the past, and I was like, I have a PS5, and we talk about it, and he's like, oh yeah, I bought a PS4 Pro during COVID, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I mean, the PS4 Pro I think still handles a lot of the stuff that you could throw at it nowadays. I don't think you really need to upgrade
Mhm.
yet, especially for someone who's playing casual. And so I think I had eventually convinced him to be like, let me boot it up. He hadn't even touched his PS4 Pro in a long time. And
Mhm.
so got him to boot it up, and he was like, yeah, dude, I finally started playing. And I was like, oh, what are you playing? And he goes, oh, I'm playing Elden Ring. I was like, excuse me? What'd you just say? He's like, yeah, I heard really good things. I'm jumping into Elden Ring. And I mean, I was in shock at the fact that to go from like, I don't really play video games to, yeah, let me try out this Elden Ring. I mean, look, he's not listening to this, but Godspeed, my friend,
Mhm.
Godspeed, because god damn, that is a hell of a leap to make.
I mean, I'll stand by it. Elden Ring is still, I think, is the most approachable of all of their games.
Even for a
It's still hard,
non-gamer, I
but
mean, not even for like, again, I'm a gamer. It's one thing for me, but like just to go from, it feels like a strong, curve there. But hey, I'll report back. We'll have my coworkers' Elden Ring diaries coming up as a to replace Nick's Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree diary.
I think they would certainly have an easier time with Elden Ring than jumping into something like Bloodborne. I feel like
That's
Bloodborne
fair.
definitely asks a lot more of,
Sure.
a person up front that Elden Ring kind of, takes the years since Bloodborne
Yeah.
of game design that they kind of, open up some different pathways for people to use. So, but yeah, that's awesome though.
Yeah.
Love hearing that.
So Nick, before we get into kind of the reviews that we have to hit, we've gotten certain, we're both got our hands full here this week
Mhm.
with games we're going to talk about. So why don't you tell me about Marvel versus Capcom 2 first? Because I mean, is this a byproduct of the new Nintendo backwards compatible playable? What I don't even know what it is, but is that what it is, or
Are you talking about the Marvel vs. Capcom collection that
yes,
was announced?
yeah, last month, right? Yeah.
Maybe partially.
Okay.
I've had Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for a while. I have the original Xbox version,
Oh,
and
okay.
I know it's the most popular, or it's one of the most popular fighting games ever. Like obviously, like
Yep.
ask some random off the street like what fighting game do they know of, and they'll be like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, man. Like
Yep.
it's
Sure.
just kind of one of those games that's permeated the gaming sphere, right?
Yeah.
And recently, as will like touch on briefly, it was Evo, which is like the biggest fighting game
Yeah.
tournament slash convention ever. And I was watching some footage from that, and they didn't have Marvel vs. Capcom 2 here this year. I believe it was last year was their kind of retro game that they were highlighting. This year it was Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, but I was watching some of that stuff and I was like, man, I'm kind of in the mood for a retro fighting game. So one night I just threw in Marvel vs. Capcom and I was like, I haven't actually tried playing this yet,
Sure,
so
right.
let's give it a try. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's very fast paced. Like it's kind of, that might be a little weird to hear, you know.
I've
like
honestly,
you
so
like
like I haven't even played any of the Marvel versus Capcom like committedly. I've played them like at friends' houses and stuff, so it's like probably ingrained in that way. But for me, I'm so bad at fighting games that I mean, it's ultimately I'm invited if everyone's like, man, I'm feeling down today. I need to like win at sometimes. Oh, I'll call Suri over for a fighting game.
Right.
But yeah. How's this hold up? I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I'm similar to you, Sri. I'm not like super, super great at fighting games. I do like watching them online. I like watching good people play them, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like they just look so incredible and captivating. And Marvel vs. Capcom 2 specifically is very it's very stylish. There's a lot of flashing effects on the screen. There's a lot of, like I said, really fast combos and fast movement. You're constantly like calling in people because how the game works is basically you pick 3 heroes or characters, I guess,
right,
and that's kind of your team. And during the match, you can either call in your counterparts to do like a special attack, or you can just completely switch out fighters on the fly. And basically the round or the match ends once all of a person's fighters are taken out, or if like the time limit reaches 0. But yeah, I'm playing this on like easiest difficulty. I have very little experience. I don't know, any of the moves really on any of the characters.
Sure.
And I just kind of hopped into an arcade mode and played a little bit and hopped it around in the training mode like very, very briefly just to try to like figure out, it's like, okay, how can I consistently hit like a move, right?
Right.
So like I've only played it a tiny bit. I'm definitely going to be playing it some more, but yeah, I just kind of had that itch to get into a fighting game after watching some of those tournaments. And yeah, like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was the bill.
Wow. Well, I mean, is it like how are you going to stick with it? Is this like a momentary obsession?
I don't know. I don't know how long exactly I'll play it because the arcade mode, it's not necessarily like a story mode or anything.
Right.
It's just kind of like, fight through progressively harder teams.
Yeah.
But there is an unlock shop and there's a bunch of unlockable characters. So like if I get more into it, I could see myself playing until I unlock like the full roster basically. But how long that takes, I have no idea. Like
that's fair.
Maybe it will just be like, hop in for a couple matches and then I'd be like, okay, I got my fighting game itch out. So
Retro in chat says Evo was very fun to watch this year. I've watched some of Evo this year, and yeah, it is. I mean, it's the best of the best, kind of doing their thing. So,
did you see that one match that had the Street Fighter Third Strike clip going around?
No, I didn't.
It's so insane, man.
Okay,
There's like the famous Street Fighter clip from like Evos of the past, the famous like Evo moment 37, basically, where it was Justin Wong, I think, and Daigo, and he basically perfect parried like a super attack basically, and then like jumped over and comboed the guy, and a very similar thing happened in one of the tournaments this year.
Wow.
And it's super hype when you watch it.
Damn. All right. Well, I mean, I'll have to pull up like a highlights list. I've only seen like the 2 or 3 moments that were like kind of like everyone was kind of raging about. And of course the finals, but or the final game, I should say. But wow, I haven't had a fighting game itch in a hot minute, but I'll get around to it. I think I have. Oh, what was it? Mortal Kombat 10, not 11, because that's the new. No, Mortal Kombat 1 is the newest.
1 is the newest, and yeah, was it 11 was the previous? And
okay,
10
okay. I have 11 then installed, but again, it's one of those things. I'll feel good about like going in, and then I'll just immediately be shit on, and it gets drastic. The last game that I will say that I've probably closest to a fighting game was, we talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago, was Die by the Blade, which is it's a one hit kill. So I had a chance because I could flail a little bit, and as long as I land a hit, I get that round. So it's a little bit different. But with that said, okay, so first of all, before we get into talking about the games, some of the games that I've been playing, I want to say that I'm taking new notes. Like, the way I take notes is different this episode. So hopefully we'll be able to synthesize my way through a decent review. Obviously, it still won't be as worded or nicely worded as my written reviews, which will go up on respawnstation.com. That's not a plug, because this whole podcast, is about respawnstation.com. You guys should go check it out. But with that said, Magical Delicacy is in this kind of cool, chill crossroads between a Metroidvania and a cooking sim. I talked about it last episode briefly, and I've got to be honest, even kind of what I described last week, having now played the game, I have some context, and it definitely changes kind of what I had in my mind, and I think it's all kind of worth knowing before you kind of go into this game. So, first of all, Magical Delicacy is developed by a single developer known as Squally. I hope I said that right. Skaule. And it's published by Whitethorn Games, who were nice enough to send me a code, which I've been playing for the last few days, so thank you to them. But with that said, you play as Flora, a witch who arrives at the harbor town of Grot. There we go. The harbor town of Grot. And essentially, where she's from, there's no witches, so she comes to this town in hopes of kind of finding out more about herself. And as soon as she lands, she gets Tom Nooked into this building that she kind of that she now owns, but she has to pay off at her own pace. And with that, the game kind of just lets you go. And I've essentially described like the first 20 minutes of the game, and it's a little bit weird. And I think that a point of contention that a lot of players will have with this game particularly is that it's a little too like hands off, and so it can be a little bit confusing in those early hours of trying to figure out what exactly you're doing. And I hope, again, that I can having played around 10 hours of the game now, I can set the pace for you guys if you are considering picking up the game. And also, one thing I will kind of say is that I played the game for about an hour, just, like a fresh new save, played through, and I was like, once everything sort of clicked, I then started a new save where I could just kind of like I wasn't focused as much on like the understanding how everything was working, and I could just kind of commit to understanding these characters and these world. And I think if we're going to start off with the positives, Magical Delicacy is a really good looking game. It's this like highly detailed pixel art that it's one of those things where the world, as you're kind of as you're exploring it, kind of starts to interact with the character. It's something that I love when pixel art games do. Essentially, what I mean by that is, like, as Flora is running across the map, she'll run past lit candles, and the candles will blow out. If she hits a lantern with her head as she jumps, the lantern will kind of sway, and there's pots that are kind of constantly like scattered around the map that you can break when you go over and pick up the kind of the stamps, I think, is what, like, that you kind of use as currency in the town of Grot. And overall, I think that kind of sticking with the positives, the game is super chill. I mean, I said that word already, but I really do think it's one of those games where you have no stress, and it's such a weird thing playing a Metroidvania, a genre that I think generally is associated with stress or just kind of like intensity, because look, like, you can fall off the map and like quote unquote die, but like you just respawn like back on the ledge where you fell off of. If you kind of take like, there's occasionally thorny plants that you'll run across, and if you bump into them, you take a hit, but there's no HP, so you're not like dying. You know what I mean? You're just kind of like.
I was gonna say, is there any combat?
There is no combat at all,
Gotcha.
And so again, it really adds to that, and I think that's all intentional. It's not like it doesn't feel like it's missing combat by not having it. It's all kind of by design that it feels that way. Now, that being said, part of that is also like the user interface, mainly with like the way you have a quick access menu on the left of your screen, and you can access it if you're playing on a controller by clicking R3, like so your right analog stick down, and it opens up a little banner that kind of has like anything you pin, so any quests or recipes that you pin that you can kind of keep track of while you're exploring the overworld, and then there's the cooking mechanics themselves, which you have this little shop, like I was saying, that you can grow and build. You start out with like an oven and a sink, but then you can get colanders or cauldrons and cutting boards and other cooking equipment and stuff. Would this be a good game if I never played a Metroidvania? That's a great question, because I think so, because I don't really play Metroidvanias. I'm not again, I'm not good with like those kind of games and like a platformers or anything like that. This is so stress free, and there's also, being a Whitethorn Games title, this is has a nice suite of accessibility options, including the option to have easy parkour or like easy traversal, which essentially, as you're exploring the map, there are certain areas that like there's certain, it's typical Metroidvania kind of mechanics where certain platforms will crumble when you step on them after like a second or two, or some of them will like disappear and then reappear, and like that stuff will be turned off if you turn on the accessibility for easy traversal. There's also a mini game every time you harvest an item from like the ground. It's like a quick time event where you have to press the A at the right time when the arrow is in the green. You can turn that off too, so it becomes like you press the X on the item you want to pick up and you pick it up. You don't have to worry about that little kind of mini game in the middle. So you can kind of tweak it here and there to kind of suit your liking. But yeah, it's a very approachable Metroidvania. But that being said, and I know you probably, from everything I've been building up to, you've probably expected it. That being said, but trust me, it's not awful. Essentially, the game is a bit of a mixed bag, and I think the thing that I really want to set straight for anyone that's listening or watching that is interested in the game is that I wouldn't fully commit this as a restaurant sim or a witchy restaurant sim, which is kind of the idea that I had when I was kind of talking about the game last week. Instead, I would consider it more of this adventure game, an adventure easy Metroidvania that has cooking centric quests, because all the quests are food related. Every quest is like someone asking, hey, could you make me this dish? And then you go and find those ingredients and do it. So that's the big thing. Get that, understand that it's not, again, some people might find that gameplay loop inherently satisfying where, you're just kind of making whatever, suits your fancy, putting it out in the store and selling it. But I think that design wise, there's a few things this game does that kind of give mixed signals in a way. So for example, you have your shop, right, that you kind of are working out of. It's your house/shop, and you have a sidekick. I'm not going to go into any kind of real story spoilers or anything, but you have a sidekick that kind of helps run the shop. But at least so far in the, again, 10 hours roughly that I've been playing of this game, the only way to use the shop, right, is to be in the building. So you can't just have, even though you have a sidekick, you can't just have like, throw a few items into the shop and be like, okay, you sell those, I'm going to go, harvest some stuff or go explore some area. You can't really do that. You really just be like, okay, I have to sell these items today. I'm going to just sit in the house and wait for the items to sell. To be fair, the items do sell. Like I have so far not had a day where I've put an item up for sale and not have it sell by the end of the day. So they do go pretty fast. It's just that you do have to be there while it's happening. And
Are there things to do there, like while you're waiting for it to sell, or is there like a lot of downtime?
There are things you can do there because, again, it's your house, so you can, all your cooking equipment and everything like that, your garden in the back of the house is all there. And while the house has like a certain format, a certain shape, like the building has a shape, you can actually take up each of the blocks in the house and kind of moving them around. So that, you know, if you want to have, like, for me, I wanted to have the compost bin and like the water next to the back exit near the garden, and then, you know, like the cauldron and stuff, or not the cauldron, it's like a brick and mortar thing, you know, where you like grind.
Mortar and pestle?
Yes, there you go. I had that upstairs, you know, away from like the oven downstairs. So like you can kind of mess around with it that way, and it offers a decent amount of customization, but when you're cooking, again, a lot of this isn't really like a cooking, like it's not a full cooking sim, because unlike when you're picking the, you know, items from the ground, you know, out of your garden or something, where there's a little mini game, the cooking has no mini game. So you are literally just waiting while the food is done. Now, on top of that, it's a very manual process. And again, this could be also by design and by intention. But like, for example, if I was going to walk you through making a sandwich, Nick, in Magical Delicacy, you have to take wheat, so which you can grow in your backyard. So you pick the wheat, you go up, you know, I'm going to describe it as I'm playing it, right? You go upstairs, you go to that thing that you just said earlier, and you put the wheat in and you get wheat flour out of it. Then you go downstairs to the oven, and you put in wheat flour and rock salt, and then you let that. Oh, and by the way, to turn the wheat to wheat flour, you have to wait like a few seconds, like 10 seconds or something like that. And once it's done, you can pick it up. Take that wheat flour down, put in rock salt and wheat flour, wait in the oven for like, 20 seconds, and then you pick it out. You take it out, and it's bread. Then you take the bread, put it in, either on like an oven or a cutting board. You put it in, and then you add like, your mushrooms, your vegetable, your rock salt again if you want it, and then you have to wait another 30 seconds for it to end. There's nothing in between that's like, oh, it's like a mini game to keep you stimulated. You're just like, you're literally just sitting there going, all right, well, to the game's credit, that's cooking for you. That's how cooking is. you gotta, especially if I throw stuff in the air fryer and I'm sitting there going, well, I guess I'll stare at the clock. But it's a little too immersive, where I think that it's kind of feels like it's missing something, or it almost feels like the cooking isn't the heart of the game. Like it's like, doesn't feel like the cooking is a center of the game as maybe I would have imagined it previously. But again, it's all about it's in the game, it's in the lore that witches are good at cooking, and so you're able to. I think that's kind of the idea of why the game is so cooking themed. And also, a fun fact: the name of the game is the name of the store, but the name of the store in the game is Flora's Magical Delicacies, but the game is called Magical Delicacy. So keep that in mind. Fun fact for you guys. I like to throw in fun facts. Now, I'm gonna keep talking about some of the stuff that I guess before I keep talking about the stuff that the game could improve with, I do want to say that part of me feels like this game is currently in an early access phase. I don't mean that in the negative way where it's like, oh, the game's broken or there's constant issues, which I think is kind of the general connotation. The game works like functionally from beginning to end. You can play through it, and there is a story there that like it's all there. It's just that it's the thing you'll come across with indie games where you might not have had a wide enough kind of player base or like a tester base, a QA tester, to give enough feedback. So for a game like this, when you're playing it right away, you kind of have to expect, okay, there's going to be feedback that's going to be tweaking what's going on in the game. And earlier today, in fact, there was an update that went out. It was a minor update, but it tweaked, like everything from movement mechanics, like certain, like the time for double jump has been tweaked. Prices have changed. Certain vendors. There's a whole bunch of that. You can read the list on Steam of all the patch notes or whatever. But So they're already working on changes. So, but just keep that in mind. When I say it kind of feels like early access, I'm not saying that as like as in it's a broken game. I'm saying it's just there's things that could quality of life improvements. That's the key word. Quality of life improvements. I think the game could use. The big one for me is like while the UI for tracking quests and recipes is super handy and useful, the inventory system is not. The inventory is like, I mean, it's like. You have a few items that you kind of scroll through, but then like after, I'm just going to give a number. I don't know the exact, but like, let's just say like there's 10 items that'll display on the home, like on the first page. To see the next 10 items, you have to go to a second page. And then after you get more items, it keeps expanding that way. And I just feel like if it was blocks, simple blocks that you can kind of just move around, it would make things so much easier to kind of navigate through that whole thing. Mm-hmm. And also, as I'm kind of playing through the game, there's small little quirks that I've picked up on, like the fact that if you're standing on stairs, you can't open the menu. That's a fun fact. Yeah.
Nice.
I found that out last night. But that being said, I digress. So you, let's see, there's here's another thing. The pots. I was talking about how, like, as you explore the detailed world, you'll come across pots that you can, when you walk over them or like hit them, they'll break and you can pick up coins. That is like, you can farm that. Like every time the game, like, you load in, like you go into a house, for example, you come back out, those pots are back. You can break them, get more coins. Granted, it's like, 3, 4, 5. It's very small. But like when you're going through the day, like when I know I wake up in the game, I'm like, okay, I can go from, here to here and here to there. And on the way, I know where all the pots are. And I'm just making these, like, I'm just picking up loose change. So it feels a little weird. I think if you're someone who really cares about like grounded reality and like in your world for this kind of thing, there's definitely things you can kind of poke holes in. Like how is everyone else in this town getting around? Like I understand I'm double jumping over here like crazy, I can boost up and all that stuff. Like, and the game kind of makes tongue in cheek references to it, like this town's a little weird, and like all those weird jumps that you got to make to get here. So that kind of thing, it's there, and the game kind of knows it. But if you're someone who's like really like, oh, like everything has to connect and make sense, this isn't that kind of thing. Generally speaking, there's also, oh my god, hello loading, how's it going? Welcome. Also, quick side note, this I've been playing the entire game again, 10 hours on the Steam Deck, and it's perfectly playable on the Steam Deck. Again, it feels smooth. I've had no hitches, nothing like that. It's honestly feels like playing a game made for the Switch, so it's like kind of perfect for that. And also, while we're kind of going through some of the weird kind of shortcomings and things that kind of just you could improve on over kind of iterations, there's a map that you can get from a certain character early on in the game. But other than that, the game doesn't really give you much else in terms of like guidance. So again, this goes into the part of me that's saying like this isn't really I don't know, it doesn't feel like a game that you're just kind of spending out, like in Stardew Valley, for example, right? Like Stardew Valley, I think a lot of people play, you can go 2 years and like, couldn't care less about the story type of thing. This is a game where I think the story is it's to its credit, it's also pretty interesting, but you have to give it the time, spend the kind of engage with it. And, that's something that could throw some people off. And when I mean engage with it, by the way, like, there's mechanics where you can go back to the person who gave you the map and buy markers that then you can put onto the map so that you can hand place, like, okay, this part, a triangle means a plant, and you can put, triangles where the plants spawn in. Certain characters you can mark with circles, whatever, you have to take that upon yourself to do. I think some of that stuff will slowly be kind of tweaked as more updates come out, because the developer has already stated that they're working on like kind of big updates as well as the minor ones they sent out earlier today. But yeah, I mean, look, I'll share my full kind of thoughts on it once I've played more of it over on RespawnStation.com. I've gone on quite a bit of a ramble today about it, but I really think that this is I don't want to get away from the fact that this is a fun game, and there are really interesting mechanics that I think people who are fans of cozy, just simple and stress-free games would love. And even for me, right, I'm booted it up after lunch today, and I had it on my Steam Deck. I was sitting here, I was just leaning back, and I had a podcast going, and only when I had the podcast, like only when like there was like story or dialogue, I'd pause the podcast and kind of pay attention to it. But the rest of the time, I'm listening to the podcast, and as I'm cooking a bread or whatever, I'm just staring at the screen, listening to the podcast, and that's kind of how I've been enjoying playing it so far. But I'd be curious to see like a year from now how this game looks and how it shapes up. I really hope that they kind of tweak all the things that people kind of. I'm not the only one, I'm sure, that is talking about some of the stuff in terms of this quality of life improvement. So I hope those stuff are tweaked so that it can be recommended for people that aren't just hardcore fans. Because if you're not, like, I don't think there's anything here where if you're not already a fan of like this genre or like this niche, granted, I've said granted a lot. I think that's my word of this episode. It's still like interesting mix of like being a Metroidvania and also this cooking game. Like it is still a weird, funky mix, and the story to it, like I don't know where it's going yet, but like the seeds that I've seen planted, no pun intended, are interesting so far that I'm curious to see where it goes. So it's not going to lure anyone that's new into the genre, but hopefully soon, one day, it can be that game with a little bit of polish. So Magical Delicacy, check it out. Again, my full thoughts and opinions after I play more of it will be up on RespawnStation.com, but that's what I think about it for now.
I got one thing that I want to ask you, Sri.
Yes.
I've played a couple of Metroidvanias, and for me personally, there's always one part in the game where I just get horribly lost. Has that happened at all to you, or is the world not exactly so labyrinthian that that's really a consideration?
That's a very good question, and I think it kind of loops into what I was saying about like the player has to take the agency. It's really on you of how you want to explore some of these areas. You can, like, the main core areas, you can't, like, you don't really get lost in. You can make your way around, and the map is super crude. Like, the map just shows, like, a square where, your like each region of the map is, and then it just has, like, dots that connect, like, saying, hey, this part of the map connects to this part of the map. And it's like vague connections like that. And you can buy another kind of additional thing at the store that adds like key characters to the map as well as like a little handy feature.
Gotcha.
But and also there's a fast travel that you unlock maybe like 5 hours, 6 hours in to make traversal a little bit easier and not as tedious, because some, like, verticality wise, there's some, like, your shop is like down right, and a certain house that you have to get to is like top left, so you're like, you got to go downtown, you got to go up and then parkour around that way and then go back to the right, and it's this complex path. There are ways you can get lost. To answer your question, there are areas that are a little bit kind of confusing, but I think it's just enough where, right as you're like, oh shit, this is like a little too complex, you'll loop back to an area you've already been to, and it's like, oh, I see where this is.
Gotcha.
Like, so you kind of fill out a little hole in your mental image of where, like, the whole map. But there are certainly a lot of things to discover. There's little chests, like little small little trinket chests that you'll find hidden in nooks and crannies for as rewards for kind of making it out that way and kind of testing it. And along with the blocks the platforms that I'd mentioned earlier that either shake and then crumble away or just disappear periodically, there's another type of block as well that's only activated at night. It's like a cloud block, so like only at night can you climb up and get to the certain areas. But here's another quirk. There is a sleeping system where you can, go to bed and sleep for a few hours, but that feature is only available at night. But if it's in the daytime and you just want to get to night so that you can get to those night areas that you couldn't access during the daytime, you can't. You just have to stay up through the day. But at night, it could be like 20. It's on a 24-hour clock, so it could be like 20 hour, hour 20 or hour 21, and then you can sleep for 6 hours and then wake up in the morning. So it's a little weird like that. Again, small quality of life improvements that it just need to be tweaked, need to be kind of polished to make it a little bit more digestible.
Yeah, for sure.
Seal that. Digestible. Oh my god. All right, Nick. God damn, I talked a lot about Magical Delicacy. So why don't you give me some time to breathe by telling me about Valley Peaks?
Yeah. So Valley Peaks is, similarly to what you were just describing, it's putting its foot forward as like a cozy game. But unlike a, Metroidvania cooking kind of game, this game's all about climbing and being out in nature. You play as a frog and you work at this company, and they're sending you to this park area called Valley Peaks to set up these radio towers on top of the mountains. For some reason, it's not 100% clear in the moment why. They're just kind of like, it's your job. Your dad was doing this. He disappeared, so now it's your job to go put up these radio towers.
Huh. So is it like Firewatch? Is it like that kind of vibe, or?
Not exactly, no. It's, Firewatch, it kind of has like a similar sort of vibe of, being in nature, right? Sure. But Firewatch is very much like a walking simulator. Like you're very much kind of just like exploring these environments. This is much more tactile in the gameplay department. Basically, I'm playing with a controller, but you can obviously do this with keyboard and mouse.
Right.
On the controller, the left and right trigger controls your left and right arm. So basically, let's use an example of like a rock wall, because in the tutorial area they have like some rock walls. Basically, the game is played in first person, and you'll walk up to the wall, go ahead and grab onto a point on the wall, and then as your hand is holding onto it, you can use the movement stick to kind of like position yourself, kind of like almost like you're pulling yourself up, but you have a little bit more of control over where you are in space, basically.
Right.
And then you can use your left arm to grab on to pull yourself up a little bit higher. You can grab on with both hands, and if that's for whatever reason you would need to do that, like if it's just like a specific kind of jump or whatever that you're trying to land. But then you can also jump while you're holding, and that'll get you up higher, to grab onto harder to reach holds, basically.
Yeah.
Pretty self-explanatory for climbing.
Right.
It's pretty intuitive. I think if you are a person that possibly has like a fear of heights or something, like maybe this game would not be for you, because the way that the
you think it'd
camera
be convincing
perspective and everything. No, like I obviously, like, as a person playing the game, it's just like, it's not like a massive mountain or anything like that, but just like from the first person perspective, the field of view and all of that, like you can definitely get a sense of height and everything, and precarious movement on small handholds is pretty common. The climbing gameplay, I think, is the most interesting stuff, though. Basically, I texted you earlier, Sri, but there is a story in the game, and this is, I believe it's described as like a micro open world or something like that.
Huh.
It is completely open, but it's not like, you're not spending like 20 minutes walking to the other end of the map. Like if you're booking it, like you'll get to the other end of the map in like 3-4 minutes, maybe. Like it's a small world. There's 12 mountains in total, and basically each mountain, what I like, it has 3 different routes, and they're color coded. So there's the blue route, the yellow route, and the red route, and those denote the difficulty of the route.
So it's really like almost like bouldering, just because isn't that how bouldering is too, like rock climbing, like it's like there's colors to denote difficulty.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with all of that, but
I've just been watching bouldering videos recently. I think that's what it is.
yeah, it's cool though, because like say like the most basic mountain that you go to, right, the blue route, it's just kind of like basic rocks, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm here, like I can just kind of surmount this by just using my hands, right?
Right.
Then you go to the yellow route, and it's like, oh, this about halfway, like kind of what's on screen right now. The rock face is like upside down, so I kind of have to like adjust my camera perspective to get like a better kind of trajectory to hit a specific handhold.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might do like the red route, and it's like, okay, now you actually have to like jump because just using your hands isn't going to be enough. Like you're going to have to mix up how you're actually climbing the mountain, but it's all on the same mountain, which I think is cool. So it's like it kind of gives you a bunch of different ways to climb this mountain. Uh, Basically, the ultimate goal is installing these radio towers. So like if you want to, you can just go up the blue route, which is the easier route, and plant the tower and be done with it there. But if you go through and climb each of the different routes, you get a little stamp on a stamp card. And once you've completed each of the routes on a mountain, you can turn that stamp card in, and it'll give you a new piece of equipment or like an upgrade.
I see.
Like the first stamp card that I turned in, if I remember right, it gives you like a slow motion watch, and basically you can slow mo, time to be able to make like a tricky jump or something like that. You eventually get things like paragliders, jetpacks, like a little rocket sled that helps you get around the environment. So it's definitely worth going out of your way to kind of explore these mountains fully and, you know, complete each path. And like on certain mountains, there'll be like different characters you can talk to and little, things like currency and upgrade materials that you'll be able to find while you do them. So there's little rewards here and there that, incentivize you to climb these mountains.
Now, part of what I was asking about,
Sure.
my Firewatch thing was also like, is there a story that you're kind of like that you at all that you're kind of that engages you, or is it just about the gameplay? Like, is that the heart of the game, or is there like a narrative that you maybe either fuels you?
So there is narrative. For me personally, it doesn't really feel like there's a whole lot there, at least currently, to really incentivize me to play it from a narrative perspective.
Sure.
It is a cozy game, so there's a lot of characters you'll come across that have like a sentence or two, like little micro stories or like a side quest. Like there's this one guy that is an archaeologist, and he has a report due about dinosaur bones, and so you have to go around and find dinosaur bones for him, right? So it's like, but that's about like where the story starts and ends. Like
Sure.
it's just like tiny
It's
little
just reasons for you
vignettes
to
that
engage with the
can.
gameplay.
Exactly.
Sure.
The overall story, like I kind of alluded to, is like your dad, took you to this park and worked for this company, but has kind of disappeared or has died. Not really 100% clear on that.
Yeah. Okay.
And like there is like a hook there, but you only really get little glimpses of these things through kind of memories that you will find as you explore, or when you place the new radios down, you'll have somebody from the company like call you and be like, oh yeah, your dad was like such an expert climber and all this other stuff. So like it gives a little nuggets here and there. And pretty much where I got to last night, I'm about like 6 hours into the game, right?
Yeah.
um there is a moment, I don't want to spoil it, but something significant does happen with like the map that is
Okay.
facilitated by a story moment.
Okay.
So like I'm curious if I'm going to be getting into more story stuff now, or if it's just kind of going to be like the inciting incident, right, to
Sure.
go
Right. Yeah.
back into the map basically.
Hmm.
So yeah, narrative wise, like also like for me personally, right, I get it's the popular thing to do for stories in media, where it's the nice good-hearted people against the evil corporation, right? But I think that sometimes that gets a little bit too overdone. And like that's something that's kind of happening here, where it's just kind of like, oh yeah, the evil corporation, turns out they're evil. And
Who
it's
would have
just like,
thought? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So it's on one layer, I'm just kind of like, it's not really doing anything for me in that regard. In the other hand, like, it's not really, I wouldn't say it's like offensive or anything. Like, it's not,
Sure.
you know, so bad that I'm just like appalled by it. It's just kind of like there for me.
That's fair.
Um, but gameplay wise, going back to the climbing, I do want to get into why I think it's so interesting, right? Because I kind of built it up. I was like, yeah, you're climbing, right?
Yeah.
But what makes it so interesting is that some of the different mountains, I mean, this game is not realistic, I should also say. It's, you know,
Yeah,
you
it's
play as a frog. It's
heavily. Well, okay, I was gonna say it's also heavily filtered and has like it's like
mhm,
cell shaded or yeah, it's a some sort of a
very
mix.
bright, saturated colors.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's not a realistic game at all. And what that allows them to do is play with some really interesting mechanics on the mountains. So, uh, you know, at the very base level, you know, if I'm going to give you like a really boring one to start out with,
Sure.
like
Yep.
once you finish a route, back down at the bottom, a new board will appear with a time on it, and it'll be like a speed run challenge. So it's like, now, if you want to open up this treasure
Oh,
chest,
I see.
get to the top of this route in like 10 seconds, right? So that's already like something where it's like, okay, it took me like 2 minutes to do this the first time. How am I gonna figure out how to like speed run this and, you know, take shortcuts on the way up and stuff? So that makes you think about the route differently.
Uh-huh.
But even on the gameplay front, so there's these, I forget exactly what they call them in game, but there's these things called like traffic rocks. And essentially what it is on certain mountains, there's these rocks that will change from green to yellow to red. And when they're green, you can grab onto them. When they're yellow, you can't grab on, but you can be holding on to the rock if you're already grabbed onto it.
Hmm.
And if it turns red, it'll like detach you, or like you won't be able to
Oh,
grab
I
it.
see. Right.
And so they structure these rocks in a way where it's like there's different timings. So you have to figure out, okay, which rock do I need to jump to from the one I'm on and time it properly so that I'm not like falling, basically, whenever I go to jump it, right? There's these rocks that will crumble if you hold on to them too long.
Right.
There's rocks that are like, there's these spikes where if you hit a spike, it like launches you off. And those ones are really dangerous because like you could be like, you know, 5 minutes into a sketchy climb, hit a spike, and then, you know, your
Plummet.
ass is on
Yeah.
on the ground, right?
Yep.
So uh there's like these really interesting kind of things that they throw in to spice up the climbing. There's these vines that will like sprout spikes. So it's just like you have to jump and climb onto these. There's these energy orbs that you'll come across that give you a double jump in the air. So they do interesting platforming with that, where
Hmm.
it's like you're trying to chain double jumps into traffic rocks and stuff like that. So the game has a really nice kind of progression of difficulty when it comes to the climbing. And it also has enough there to vary up the climbing so that it doesn't kind of get like stale, like you're just kind of grabbing the same rocks but in different configurations,
Right.
which I really appreciated.
Hmm. Wow. Well,
Um,
I mean, is it so? Are you finding it one of those games that you play to relax, or is it as for like a challenge? I know it's cozy, and there is a cozy mode to make it kind of even cozier. But
mhm.
like, I mean, are those time trials enough to bring you back, or like are those things are something you're engaging with it at all yet, or you're kind of just going
I
for the
tried
story
it a
right now?
couple of times. More so, I just, you know, am going through the different routes and like fully completing the mountains more or less.
Yeah.
The time trials, like, basically they are fun to try to challenge yourself with, but the reward is basically just like some gears that you can use to like unlock other upgrades. So it's kind of like not like a dramatic kind of reward or whatever. It's just kind of like more bonus things that you can find like in the environment or by completing side quests.
Hmm.
Um, it's an interesting question. I am not playing on the cozy mode, so like I
Sure.
did, you know, make a conscious decision to play the more challenging mode
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
game. It's maybe I'll answer it this way. So if you split it into two halves, you have the climbing gameplay and then you have like the open world exploration kind of questing
Yeah.
mode, I'll say. The questing stuff is a lot more relaxing than the climbing. That you
Ah.
are just kind of like exploring the world, talking to people, finding items here and there, finding like little trinkets and currency in hidden spots, that sort of thing. That's a lot less stressful, right? The mountain climbing is not like it's weird. Like the game is fun and engaging when you're mountain climbing, so I wouldn't exactly say it's relaxing, right? Because there are
Right.
several times where it's like I'll be like upside down. This is my 4th or 5th attempt trying to climb this mountain, and I keep missing this one jump and like sending me all the way back down to the bottom. So like it's not exactly relaxing in that way.
Yeah.
Unless I guess you find climbing and
some people do find bouldering and rock climbing. Kind of releasing of the brain. Maybe in 2 episodes when you come back and you're like, I'm pro rock climber. Maybe you're just hit that zen zone.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like the side quest stuff. For me personally, basically how I described it to you, Sri, earlier for the audience listening is that I don't think that there's enough real meat on the bone for that kind of stuff. And again, if the goal of the game is to be, calm and cozy kind of stuff, like, I wouldn't expect there to be like, dialogue choices and things like that when you're talking to people.
Sure.
But like, I feel like the
you're
gameplay
not fighting
you're
not killing a god by the end of this game. Is that what you're telling me?
Potentially, we'll see. Basically, like the gameplay from the climbing angle is so engaging and so varied that it just kind of feels really basic when you're doing the questing stuff, where most of it's just like, oh, I lost my glasses. They're over like in this area. Go find my glasses, please, and stuff like that. So,
have you ever played Bugsnax?
No.
I don't know why. I haven't played the game yet. I was hoping to get some time with it, but I have not. I've been busy with Magical Delicacies. But I don't know, something about like just the vibe of this game gives me Bugsnax like energy. That's a sentence I just said.
Kinda. Yeah, at least from like
do you chuckle at all in the game? I feel like that's a baseline. Have you found yourself chuckling at all in this game? Bugsnax has some chuckle-worthy moments.
Like here and there, like
sure.
It's very like wholesome kind of dialogue and stuff.
So it's not like ridiculous though, because I think that's the thing with Bugsnax. It's like some ridiculous stuff, so you're just kind of like, oh, what the hell am I looking at? But I guess if they're going for that wholesome thing, it's a little bit different than
Yeah, it's for sure a lot like of wholesome, just kind of like cutesy stuff. Not really, there might be a joke here and there, but it's not anything like super crazy, right? So like,
and I know there's like mini games and stuff. Is that I mean, obviously you're saying like there's not a lot of meat on those bones, but like, so is that with like, are those at all useful, or like, is there like are they engaging further than like? Because there's like, I mean, I'm looking at it and it says there's Mortimer's boat race, or you can head to Bone Hill and partake in the pumpkin hunt.
Yeah, they're mini games, I think, is obviously the appropriate way to say. Like they're very basic and very quick. And doing them, you get more of those like kind of rewards, like either currency or upgrade points.
Yeah.
So they're like fun distractions to be able to partake in, but they're not really like this dramatic thing that you could really sink a lot of time into.
Okay.
It's usually like for the pumpkin hunt, for instance. The first time you do it, there'll be 4 pumpkins that spawn in this area. Go find the pumpkins. The next time you do it, there's 8 pumpkins. The next time you do it, there's 12 pumpkins. And then once you're done after that, it's like, okay, there's no more stages. Like you've gotten the rewards and you found all the pumpkins, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like little distraction kind of things on that front. One thing I do want to touch on is just a couple of like nitpicks or issues I have, because I do have some issues with the game so far.
Sure.
One thing that I want to point out is the kind of the dichotomy of the how do I want to say this? Here, let me pull up my notes, because
we're doing it live. We're doing it. No, it's all right. There's look, if I think if I wanted to go back, I could probably talk for another 5-10 minutes about Magical Delicacy, but I've been I've been trying to keep my notes as focused as possible, so it's it's hard to translate sometimes. Some of those random thoughts that you had.
Yeah. So essentially, when climbing, right? There's a big like that. I would say climbing is the main draw of the game.
Sure.
The climbing is the most fun aspect of that, but there are a couple of things that can make it a little bit irritating. One of those is that this doesn't always happen, but it's happened on, a more than once occasion where the game kind of eats an input and that has caused me to fall. So like, for instance, maybe I'm trying to use my glider to get somewhere. I jump, press the glider button, and the glider does not come out. And so
Damn.
I've dropped, way further than I intended, right? That one I'm, less really irritated by because it really is pretty infrequent that happens.
Yeah.
The one thing that I don't like about the climbing is when you're going on the routes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's these posts that are numbered, and you have to hit the posts on the route basically to get the credit at the top. Sounds
Okay.
self-explanatory, but like,
Wait, so are those like checkpoints or just
no, they're just
like
markers that you have to hit. Basically, it's like your requirement. Like if you're going on this path,
to say that you did it, for sure.
Yes, you have to hit all of these things. The thing that I've discovered is, at first I wasn't sure what was happening, right? Because I would go up on this route, I'd be like 3 posts in out of like 6, right? And I'd be going for a tricky jump, and then for whatever reason,
real quick,
my progress
are these the things that are at the bottom right that show like little dots? Are those markers?
Yes. So whenever you hit a post, we'll see if it happens here. Yeah, like down in the bottom right there, you see how there's like 5 circles.
Yep.
That's your progress. So there would be like a time where I'd be like, partway through or like pretty high up on a mountain, and then I would fumble something, not fall all the way down, but just kind of fumble something.
Yeah.
And my progress resets. And like if you climb all the way to the top from your stumble, it's just kind of like when you get to the top, and it's like, oh, so I have to restart the whole route now because like I fumbled once. What I think ended up happening is that I discovered I was using the gear, right? I was using the glider or the slow-mo things, and it was resetting my progress. And if that is intentional, like they want you to climb the route, right? They don't want you to like, just bypass things with like the jetpack or anything.
Yeah.
If that is the intention, I think that's really kind of weird because you're incentivized to climb these mountains to get the gear. So why would the game not want you to use the gear while you're climbing?
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's kind of the one thing that like at first, like I said, I wasn't even sure what was happening. It was just like I would fall like a little bit of the way. I'm like, why do I have to go all the way back down to the bottom now? Like what did I mess up? That doesn't really make sense. But then I kind of clued in. And I was like, I think this is happening because I'm like switching to my glider partway through this. So that's just like kind of a weird inconsistency that I have with the gameplay that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If that is the intended way, again, I'm not really even sure if it's intended or not. But that's kind of the issue that I had with it. And I did have one soft lock with the game.
Okay.
I basically climbed up to the top of a mountain, if the developers are watching. I climbed up one of the mountains and talked with an NPC, and then looked down, and on like a jagged ledge, there was another NPC just kind of crouched there. And so I jumped down to it and talked to the NPC, and it gave me the same dialogue from the person up top, but froze me in the conversation. And like I couldn't do anything until I like booted out of the game and rebooted essentially. So by and large, the game runs really well, and like I haven't really been having many issues like that. It's kind of just like isolated instances, but that was something that did happen while I was playing.
But overall, though, I mean, you're gonna stick with it, see how it is. What's your how are you feeling about Valley Peaks?
Definitely gonna stick with it. Gonna do a full review whenever I'm done with it. I'm having fun with it. I just think that the big draw is the climbing, and I think a lot of the other areas are not as developed as I would want them to be, like the climbing is.
That's fair. Is this one that, so first of all, this game is out now on Steam for obviously PC, And again, it's called Valley Peaks. It's from developer Tub Club, and it's published by those awesome guys. And I'm not, that's the name of the game. I'm not the publishers. I'm not just saying that they're awesome. Overall, though, I think that Nick's decent with it. You can find out more over on RespawnStation.com once he shares his thoughts, once he gets through it. But have you shared your thoughts on the visuals? I mean, I know briefly mentioned it. Were you hot on them at all? I was just curious.
They're okay. They don't look bad. It's
just so weird. Like it's like heavily filtered.
Simplistic.
It's like it feels like so. It almost feels like it should have grunge, but it's not. It's a reverse grunge. That's like this. You know what I mean? It's like the grunge filter, but like it's positive. It's not like dirty. It's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
It feels like the kind of game that like you easily could have seen in 2D and was ported into a 3D engine. Right,
Sure.
like it's very colorful. It's very minimalistic.
Yeah,
but it's in 3D, so it's like just complex enough that things stand out that you need to see in the horizon and things like that. But yeah, I don't think it looks bad.
Sure.
I also wouldn't exactly say it's like the most original art style in the world, but it's definitely not like ugly or anything in my opinion.
And sometimes you know how it is, guys. I like to share fun facts. So fun fact: the developer, those awesome guys. Again, I'm not telling you who they are. Okay. They also published a game that Nick, I think if you've heard about, I've played the demo of. It's called Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom.
I have heard of it, yeah.
That is a fun one, and that is from these very publishers. And the developers, I haven't actually played anything that they've made, but it's a 2-person development team from Scotland, and they are a young BAFTA nominee. Oh.
Right on.
Oh, look at that. Always impressive. With that said, let's see here. Here's a random detour. I've been saving this detour since, first of all, actually, in the chat, Cameron says, I like this format of the show. Right on. Hell yeah. Thank you very much. This has been an ever-evolving format. We're very different from the first episode we've had, but thank you very much. So at one point I said something about like Zen mode or whatever, and reminded me of this thing, and I had to tell you this. So yesterday, I was in the middle of work, and I have YouTube up just to kind of like go through, whatever. It's like auto plays kind of my watch later stuff, and at one point it plays an ad for Zenless Zone Zero. Do you know about this game? It's from the developers of Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, Hoyoverse, I believe. And yeah, it. First of all, I know nothing about this game. I have played Genshin Impact. I think it's really it's a cool looking game, and like the fact that it's free to play blows my mind. But I digress. Zenless Zone Zero, I have not touched. I have not looked at. I didn't even realize that the game was out. But there was a trailer that was playing in front of this video I was watching, and it was like one of the characters, and he's like, "Hey, did you know Zenless Zone Zero is out now, and you can get 100 pulls?" And then again, this is all playing in my peripherals. I kind of glance over and I'm like, "Oh, I see it," and then I go back, and then this lady drops in. All right, and respectfully, a bodacious woman, a curvy lady. And she goes, and don't forget about the boopons. And I was like, whoa, did she just say boopons? I had to look it up, okay? I looked it up in a private browser. It's boopons. That's spelled Boopons. So, dude, blew my mind. I was like, did they just say boopons on a YouTube ad? I was so confused. Oh, man. I hope all of you, everyone listening, I hope you all stumble upon this ad accidentally and go through the same thing I did, because god damn. I did a double take. Anyway, going back to it. All right, I'll briefly talk about this, because we've spent an hour talking about games that we've played. Most of the time, in the last week of my gaming, apart from Magical Delicacy, which has been played on this here beautiful Steam Deck, was on my phone, and I'm not a mobile gamer, so this is a weird week for me. But here's a honest truth, okay? I'm not just saying this. There's 2 games that I have installed on my phone. I don't really play a lot of games on my phone. It's chess and Uno. And we were lucky enough last week to be sponsored by Uno Mobile. So they gave, they literally gave us a link and said, hey, people play the game with your link. It's we support each other. They sponsored the show, the streams over the weekend. We had a great time just playing Uno, hanging out. And I decided, first of all, Uno, really fun. I can say this not because the sponsorship is over, okay, but also I think that it is it's a testament, if anything, to the developers of this game. It is borderline gambling, that game, okay? You get coins, and then you bet coins on, and you have to put in the in-game currency to essentially, stake your bets to go into the game, to get into a game, and then when you lose the game, you lose more coins, and then if you win, you gain more coins. So it is you are putting real in-game currency on the line, and then if you run out of those coins, you have to then spend real currency or earn them through watching ads or whatever. But crazy formula. It is surprisingly addicting, and I didn't ever really process or analyze it because I'm always I'll play a game or two and I'm out. It's not like I'm just sitting there for hours doing it. But I was sitting there for hours doing it this weekend, and I was like, wow, I could see how people could get lost to this. So if you're watching this and first of all, you downloaded the game and supported us, thank you. But also, hopefully you're not losing too much of your life there. But since I was playing games on my phone, Nick, I decided to indulge. A few people were asking me in our chats to check out.
Hey, you got games on your phone?
Yeah, a few people were asking me, do I have games on my phone? So I downloaded Call of Duty Mobile.
Nice.
I played maybe 6-7 games. All right, just TDM, playing it easy. Nick, I shit on these kids. All right, these kids have stood no chance. I mean, I was going 17-1. You know what I mean? And it's 40 kills to win TDM in COD Mobile. So I mean, it was I felt like I was just okay, I'm gonna give the context. I felt like I was the star of a mid-2000s comedy where it was okay for an adult man to go onto a playground and just beat the fuck out of some kids, just punch them in the face. It was okay back then, and that's exactly how I feel playing Call of Duty Mobile. Had a good time. That's all to say. And really surprised by the fact that it is so close to the console. It feels like firing range from Black Ops is on there, and I'm like, oh my god, this almost looks like firing range did on my phone, or now it looks the same way that it looked like on my PS3 back in the day. So that was a fun discovery to have while I was playing. But still, I'm gonna go back to Call of Duty Mobile and the real Call of Duty. But Nick, that's a perfect time for us to talk about what's going on in the news, because Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is on Xbox Game Pass. We talked about it 2 episodes ago now. First of all, we hit episode 20, huge. But 2 episodes ago, we talked about Xbox and how they're going through these price changes and tier ads and all that, tier shifting, I should say. And one of the things we said was that probably it's because of Call of Duty that a lot of this stuff is happening. And here we are. We have a Call of Duty game as of today. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, the latest one, the new one, is on Xbox Game Pass. And I have it installed. I haven't driven in, but I have it installed. Maybe next week we'll talk about it. But
yeah, we have you and I have a plan for a future episode that may or may not involve cloud streaming.
Yes,
that I think this is going to be the perfect candidate for me to test with. Something that's high intensity, high impact, and also a lot of gigs to install. So
143. Would you like to know? 143 gigs is how much it was.
Not surprising.
I will say I'm not going to give away too much of the cloud gaming thing, but this here is an Amazon Kindle that I have. It's literally, I just use it for reading books. But interestingly, because it's Amazon, it comes with Amazon Luna pre-installed. I think it was pre-installed. Now, I hope anyway. So just out of curiosity, I opened the app to see, because essentially if you're a Prime member, it gives you a rotating list of different games you can freely play on Amazon Luna. There's 1 month where you could play through the entirety of Resident Evil 2, you know, on through the cloud. This, so I was looking through to see what this month's options were, and I realized that X Defiant is playable on there. And you know what? I played a game of X Defiant through the cloud, Nick. I hooked up my Xbox controller, went 14 and 17, and I have to say that's better than I thought it was going to be. I was going
to say that's not too bad.
It is like, it feels like I'm drugged, is what it feels like. Playing a multiplayer game through the cloud feels like, you know, like someone put something in my drink, and like my reaction times, I'm like, oh, there he is, and then it's just like, you know, I like slowly turn in the direction. It's a trip.
That's fully what I'm expecting, honestly. Like Microsoft, you know, I ideally when we do this cloud gaming experiment, I will be playing through Game Pass and Xbox Cloud streaming. So it's like,
yeah.
I've heard good things. I've never tried it, so let's see how it stacks
I agree.
up. But
I'm
what
hoping,
you're describing is what I'm expecting. So
I think that at the very least there should be I mean, again, well, this would be a future episode. I think there should be a game that's offline or, you know, online, but it's like single player to test the validity of like just how some of these games can run. But yeah, multiplayer is gonna be a rough one. I can give you that much for free. With that said, let's go on to briefly. I mean, we don't need to talk too much about it. I think. I mean, look, let's just get to it. Assassin's Creed has officially addressed this whole controversy about the game and all the people fucking signing petitions to get this game unreleased or whatever. Like, first of all, look, if you want to read what Ubisoft or Assassin's Creed had to say, you can go to at Assassin's Creed on Twitter or X. I'm not going to call it X. Twitter. You can go on Twitter and read it. It's 4 separate JPEGs, okay? So I'm not going to go through all that. But honestly, I feel like this was completely unnecessary. It's one of those few times where I'm like, man, you could have just ignored this one. Just let it go under the, you know, it's like a fart in the breeze. Just let it fucking drift. Don't be like, oh, it's let me address the bad smell in the room. No one's gonna like it's totally unnecessary. Because a worse, like, here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, the people that are saying the stupid shit are not going to be convinced by 4 JPEGs on Twitter. Like like if anything, it's going to make them dig their heels in more. It's just these kind of things. I mean, you just kind of have to, almost ignore them. And I'm not saying this to every situation. I mean specifically the scenarios regarding this particular game and this release. Yeah, just don't do it, Ubisoft. Next time, just ignore them. All right, Nick, what's this next item? Because I know it's a controversial one.
Yeah, let's we can fly through some of these pretty quick because, like you said, we talked a good bit at the beginning about
we did
our games and stuff. So, Halo's TV show got canceled after season 2 at Paramount Plus. You know, Phil Spencer probably saw those 17 Fallout noms and was like, "This ain't it." So yeah. Apparently, the producers are possibly looking at another network, maybe picking it up in the future. But
dude, I mean, how about Netflix? I heard there's a real home there for people who write things that you don't know about the source material. You know what I mean? You don't have to engage with any source material over on Netflix, apparently, and still write stuff. So,
right,
that seems to be the obvious home for this Halo show.
Pour one out for the Halo fans, maybe. I don't know if the Halo fans were watching the show or not.
I think they're happy, if anything. I think they're rejoicing.
Yeah.
Pour one with the Halo fans. Okay.
Weird news.
Really weird.
From the last day or two, Humble Games is closed or restructured.
Yeah.
Essentially, it came out that the entire staff of Humble Games was laid off. But according to a post on their Twitter, which I have up here, the post reads, this is from, at Play Humble Games. In these challenging economic times for indie game publishing, Humble Games has made the difficult but necessary decision to restructure our operations. This decision was not made lightly. It involved much deliberation and careful thought, with the goal of ensuring the stability and support of our developers and ongoing projects. Additionally, the restructuring of operations at Humble Games will have no impact on operations at Humble Bundle.
Yep.
We are acutely, aware of the profound impact this decision has on our team members at Humble Games and deeply empathize with everyone affected. Our team's contributions have been world-class and invaluable,
Hmm.
supporting the launch of our games since we started publishing in 2017. We are committed to navigating this transition with as much empathy and understanding as possible. Supporting our development partners and assisting former team members remains our top priority. We are committed to making this transition as smooth as possible for everyone involved. Thank you for your support and compassion during this challenging period. It is deeply appreciated. But we should also note that there is one of those reader context things on the bottom
Yeah.
that says, contrary to Humble Games' PR statement, the publisher's restructuring meant all of the staff had been fired.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a weird one. I don't really know what to really think on that.
What I mean, look, I think we're right around the corner from at any point now. We're going to start seeing these, you know, apology things come out, and it's like going to be AI generated or something. You know, it's like
priority is right. Like,
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, we fired everybody. Don't be mad at us too long, please. Like,
It's with our deepest compassion of the thoughts for the future of our teams that we have let them go.
Yeah, we'll have to find like a certain like keyword or phrase, kind of like how AI, generated images
Have
like
the six
can get
fingers,
the fingers right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we'll have to find something in these that eventually
Yeah,
can pick them out. But yeah, that sucks
I mean,
for everybody that was laid off. Obviously,
100%.
that pain train keeps on chugging, seemingly
Every other
without
episode,
end,
it seems.
so-
Every other episode. And we're not even talking about every single one. I mean, there's times where we'll cut out some stories just because they're like, wait, it would be too ridiculous sometimes for how much we tend to just joke around or fuck around on the show to just suddenly be like, and let's take a moment of silence for the 200 people that have just lost their jobs this week. But something like these, like Humble Bundle and Humble Games. I mean, this is something that we've actively supported and kind of take part in. At least, I'm a big fan of Humble Bundle, so yeah, it's unfortunate. Nick, hit me with the next one because you're the person to go for this, and then I'll throw a little bit of what's going on in the inbox with you.
Sure thing. So last kind of thing was just kind of a rapid fire list of some of those Evo announcements we talked about earlier. That Evo was going on, and there's always some fighting game goodies going on around Evo. Basically, tons of DLC characters coming to a bunch of different games. I don't have them all listed here, but some highlights were, Heihachi is he's back coming into Tekken 8.
Snap.
One that would interest you, Sri, Guilty Gear Strive.
Is
getting a guest character, which is Lucy from Cyberpunk
Edgerunners. That is actually one of the items in the inbox that I was gonna throw in.
Yeah. I don't believe there was any gameplay in the trailer that I saw of that, but the animation in Guilty Gear is like insane. That character is probably gonna look like awesome.
Hell yeah. Yep. 100%.
We got to see some gameplay, or like their in-engine gameplay teaser for Terry in Street Fighter 6, which is exciting. Crossing over from Retro said somehow Heihachi returned. Yeah, that seems exactly how that is.
I've heard yes, absolutely. I've heard that. I've seen so many memes about this, and I don't even fully appreciate the context of it.
But yeah, tons of games are getting DLC characters. The other big announcement that I pulled was a game reveal, actually, that I believe is out now. SNK versus Capcom SVC Chaos just got a port.
I'm sorry, Nick. I believe you just gave me your password. I wanted the name of the game. If you could repeat that, just.
Yes, it was SNK versus Capcom SVC Chaos.
Jesus. Okay.
I don't know anything about that game, but the more obscure kind of like older retro fighters that get ports, like I'm never going to complain about that stuff because games preservation is a real thing, and the more seriously, it's even more interesting when the companies go for maybe the weird, less popular picks. I think are always the fun ones to get brought back.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Those were just some rapid fire kind of Evo excitements that happened over the last week.
Speaking of rapid fire, it's time for the inbox. I'm going to fly through some of the headlines that we got this week because there's some really good ones that I'm looking forward to. Open world sandbox RPG Streets of Rogue 2 has a release date. It's coming out on October 22nd into Steam Early Access. Dude, I mean, I've been looking forward to this game. This looks awesome. 100% recommend checking it out. A few weeks ago, I had talked about playing a preview build for a visual novel where you play as a vampire that is psychoanalyzing other vampires. And that game is Vampire Therapist, and it is out now on PC via Steam. And that one, just as a special shout out, and Steam and GOG, but that one is a special shout out, is created and stars Cyrus Nemanti, who some people might recognize as the voice of Dionysus in Hades. And he's joined by voice actors Matt Mercer from Critical Role and everything else you could probably think of, Sarah Grayson from Hades 2, Francesca Moe from Hades, and a newcomer, Kylie Clark. I apologize if I said any of those names wrong. We're flying through some of these names. House of Golf 2 has been delayed to August 16th, and it's coming out for the PS5, Xbox Series XS, and PC via Steam and Epic Game Store. There's a few weeks ago, I think actually a few months ago at this point, because the podcast has been going on for so long, I had mentioned another visual novel that's centered around photo mode, and it's called The Star Named Eos. And again, would you believe it, that is also out now on PC, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PS5. I feel like I'm one of those, like, you know, like I feel like I don't know, I'm lining up for some raw job here, man. All right, last few ones here. This one looks awesome. It's from Catchweight Studio and Team 17 Digital. It is a World War I top-down survival horror game called Conscript. It just came out yesterday, and you can find out more about it on RespawnStation.com. But for the quick hitters, it's available now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and the Nintendo Switch if you want to take your spooks on the go. Second to last one. Nick, do you like raw men? Raw Men Food Fighter Arena, the delicious free-to-play food arena shooter from developer Animal and publisher TinyBuild, is out now on PC exclusively via Epic Game Store. I've been waiting for that introduction for all week. No, I saw this yesterday, and I was like, this is exactly how to introduce this to Nick. But honestly, though, the game, crazy name, but it is looks really fun in the gameplay, and the trailer had a lot of personality too, the launch trailer, so check that out. Last game in the inbox, Nick, this one I think is something that could be up your alley. Tribe 9 is an extreme action RPG made by Danganronpa series creator Kazukata Kodaka. I apologize if I said that wrong. It's developed by both Atasuki Games and Tukio Games, and it's having a deadly playtest, closed beta on August 9th on PC via Steam, and essentially it lets you fight for freedom and survive the dangerous streets of Neo-Tokyo with, again, action RPG combat. It looks really fun, and again, I think it's up Nick's alley.
I'm looking at some screenshots right now, and it has like top-down pixel art stuff, but then like fully 3D combat. That looks pretty cool.
Yeah, there you go. And that's, ladies and gentlemen,
that does look like it's up my alley, sir.
And that has been the inbox. And Nick still mixed on raw men, though. still unsure.
You know what? Let's say for games, sure.
What do you rate that title? Raw Men Food Fighter Arena.
You know what? Like you're asking for my title ranking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a solid like 7.5, I'd say. That's a pretty good title.
Well, speaking of solid 7.5, Nick, how about a solid 7 out of 10? Because that's what we're here to talk about.
I was completely absent-mindedly doing that.
Today, we're going to be talking about the perfect 7 out of 10 games. These are, well, actually, I guess that's a perfect way to start this conversation. Nick, what would you define as a 7 out of 10 game? Because it's not necessarily just a game that gets a 7 out of 10. Not every 7 out of 10 game is a good 7 out of 10 game.
Right. I think, I've been thinking about this all day, trying to figure out how to tackle this.
The numbers, Mason. What do they mean?
A 7 out of 10 you know, the quintessential 7 out of 10 game
Yep.
is a game that obviously doesn't hit all the right beats and isn't, it's not going to win the highest praises or the best marks, but there's just some quality about it that you can't let go of, right?
Yep.
I think there's plenty of sixes that I've played, sixes and below, where it's like I kind of, am blocking that out of my memory, right? But those sevens, whether it's, an interesting art direction, some sort of interesting concept or gameplay,
Yeah.
something about it has to worm its way into your head.
I think part of that, as an addendum, I do agree with what you're saying. As an addendum, I think mostly 7 out of 10 games are almost like it's a communal thing. Like, I don't think you really have, like, there are certainly games you can say, oh, this is a 7 out of 10. But I think, like, usually, by and large, a lot of 7 out of 10 games are universally accepted as 7 out of 10 games. But you can just be like, oh, this is like the 7 out of 10 game that came at the right time, connected with me in the right way, right place, right time, whatever it is that makes it special. And those are the games that we're going to be talking. Jesus, I keep flashbanging myself. Those are the games that we're going to be talking about. Those are the highlights that I think that kind of stick with us.
I think we should also clarify potentially that when we say 7 out of 10 games, at least for me personally, it is more of a vibe that it's a 7 out of 10, right?
Not IGN
like, these
7
are not
out of 10.
games that were
yeah.
Exactly. We're not saying like, all the outlets gave it a 7 out of 10 and those are the only ones that we're allowed to talk about, right? Like there are some games that I brought here that we're going to talk about that I would say are better than a 7 out of 10, some that are worse 100%, than a 7 out of 10.
And you know what? There's a 7 out of 10 game that I'm going to talk about that I reviewed for a Respawn Station, and I give it higher than a 7 out of 10. It's just that, again, communally, it was a 7 out of 10 game. But again, we'll get to that. So, I think, well, actually, do you want to just get into talk about what are our favorite 7 out of 10s are, or do you want to ease into it a little bit?
Let's throw one out there, and then we can, see where the conversation takes us.
All right. I'll let you go first, Nick. Throw out one of your, in chat, feel free to, if you're watching live, feel free to throw in your favorite 7 out of 10 game in chat. Maybe we'll mention it.
Let's go with, I'll go with this because it can branch out a bit bigger.
Okay.
I'll go with No More Heroes 3.
A game I have not played, so you have to walk me through this one.
Sure. So No More Heroes is the, it is from Grasshopper Manufacture, who the creative lead there is Suda51, who is, famous, game
infamous, maybe,
famous,
infamous,
either or. And I think Suda and Grasshopper occupy a really interesting space in the industry where he is a developer and, their team there at Grasshopper, anytime they're putting something out, like, I'm interested, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the visual style, the tone, and, in some degrees, the gameplay are always really interesting, or at least something that, there's going to be something unique about it, right?
Right.
No More Heroes, to give the quickest explanation I can about it. All of those games are, you play as this guy named Travis Touchdown. He looks like Johnny Knoxville and has a lightsaber, and he is a weeb that is trying to get the #1 spot on the world assassination ranking, right? So it's just a very eclectic kind of series. It's very comedic. It's very over the top and violent, and it just has this crazy concept, right? And I played No More Heroes 3 specifically last year, I believe, or the year before, and it's great fun. It's stylistically, it blends so many different things. So primarily it's like an action game, but there's also some pseudo open world driving. There's collectible finding. There is these text adventure kind of sequences that will happen throughout the story. The gameplay, it's first and foremost an action game, like I said, so that's kind of the most fun, but it is kind of basic. Like it's not like a Devil May Cry or a Hi-Fi Rush where you're memorizing these combos. It's kind of like you have your like 3 or 4 hit combo, and that's what you're using in the combat, right?
Right.
Um, the open world stuff, like there is driving and exploring, but a lot of the environments are like really flat and like kind of lifeless,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So there's these considerations that are made in the budget and like, you know, the scale of the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you watch some of the stuff that happens in this game and you like, at least for me, like I'm just like sitting there in shock and I'm just like, that's, you know, I've never seen a game do anything like this, right?
Yeah.
Um, there is a clip from No More Heroes 3. Again, this is going to be kind of scattershot, I think.
Sure.
We'll see how we structure these, but there's a clip that I have on my phone saved for when I bring up fighting games, which is interesting because we were talking about that earlier. And it was a tweet that I had made where I was playing the Street Fighter 6 beta like last year, and I was playing against a higher CPU, and basically the CPU was just grabbing me over and over again and throwing me onto the ground repeatedly. And there's a bit in No More Heroes 3 where Travis is fighting this boss that's like a cyborg ninja kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the cutscene, he's starting to like lunge at Travis, and he's like, I'm gonna get you. Your death is like at nigh. And then Travis grabs him and just pile drives him and like throws him on the ground. And then it cuts and he's just like, not today. And he just keeps doing it. And then eventually after the 4th or 5th one, the ninja's just like, oh shit, getting thrown onto the ground. It's one of the funniest clips from a game that I've seen in a while. And it, if only for that alone, it would make me put it on this list here. But just in general, I mean, the games, they're goofy, they're eclectic, and you can kind of say this about all of Suda's games, right? Like, you know, we're going around with, there's trailers for a remaster of Shadows of the Damned, which is also like a very kind of eclectic, like, goofy horror game that's like a third-person shooter. No More Heroes, you have these action games, you know, Killer is Dead and Killer 7, Lollipop Chainsaw. These games, they all have like limitations, but there's just something about them that I'm particularly really drawn to. Maybe it's just the over-the-top style and stuff that kind of, you know, I kind of vibe with that stuff a bit more than, you know, more gritty or serious things or more realistic, like, you know, simulators, things like that. So maybe it's just like a personal preference thing. But yeah, No More Heroes, like whenever I started looking at my game wall to see, you know, what I wanted to talk about, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely got to talk about Suda. Like,
yeah, no, it's totally, that is a thing I've heard about the Suda. And I mean, again, it's one of those things, like I think that I expected that series to die, and then it like suddenly came back to life, like stronger than ever. I was like really thrown off by it, but you know, honestly, good for that, good for them, because that's hard to do nowadays. Now, before I get into some of my picks, I will say I'll read some from chat. Minecraft, hot take. I think Minecraft is, I'd say like near 10 out of 10. I mean, that is a game that knows absolutely everything that it does. So I would say that's a 10 out of 10, you know, by and large. But Dragon Age 2, I have heard that is a much more of a 7 out of 10 game. That's fair. Rayman 2 from the 90s. Whoa. That's I don't think have any 90s games 7 out of 10s on this list.
See, but I could see the argument for Minecraft, honestly. Okay. Like, I think, you know, I haven't personally played it in a while.
You got,
and obviously, coward. Like, it set the world on fire and still does constantly. But, like, you know, think about, like, if you're going into Minecraft for a specific experience, right? Like, if you're a specific type of gamer, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the pixel art, voxel graphics are kind of like, you know, maybe that's not your cup of tea. The combat, kind of like what I was just describing with No More Heroes, like you have your bow and you have your sword and stuff, but like it's not the most deep kind of combat system in the world.
Yeah.
And then it's like where you get a lot of the depth is in the crafting recipes and all that, but it's, I could definitely see an argument being made
Hmm.
for it. It's definitely an unconventional one. I don't think many people would do that, but
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Now some of mine. I purposefully didn't put my list on the shared doc because I want. There's some controversial ones, and I didn't want. I didn't want to have
ooh.
Nick be on his on the defense. All right. So the first one, the one that I was kind of teasing out earlier, Sleeping Dogs. I think it is
Mm.
very much so, especially when it came out, an absolute 7 out of 10, just the way it was received. I think the general consensus was a 7 out of 10 game. However, I'm not going to say what I gave it over on RespawnStation.com. You can check it out for yourself. But it is higher than a 7 out of 10, and I absolutely love the game. It's just that I think it clicked at the right time. I was looking for an open world game that, I really expected like a GTA type of thing. I wanted something like, Saints Row, but not as like, dick and ball jokes, and Sleeping Dogs was it so
It definitely fills that crack. Yeah.
it does. And it's like, so it has these segments of like Tokyo that are like inspired but not really, like it's like, kind of like stitched together. I believe it's Tokyo. Now I'm second guessing myself, but
I think it's Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, sure. I'm an idiot. Hong Kong. So, but it's like fragments of the city. Like it's not like one for one recreation. It's just like portions of the real life place that are kind of stitched together to form the in-game world.
It is Hong Kong.
Okay, there you go. Hong Kong. I'm not even. I should have pulled up my old review. It'd probably be on there. But of course, I'm not going to do that because you need to check it out. And it has a really like a surprisingly crazy cast, including Emma Stone. Okay, Emma Stone. Okay, and it's honestly it has this one moment. I don't have you played Sleeping Dogs, Nick?
I played it several years ago.
So there's a moment. So did you finish? Like, do you know the story?
Again, it's been so long that I don't remember the particulars. I was gonna say the one thing that got its hooks in me is the like death animations when you like use the environment.
Sure.
Like I remember there's some really wacky ones in Sleeping Dogs. Particularly, I remember one with like you like throw a guy on a swordfish or something like that. Yeah.
Well, so there's this really actually now that I'm blanking on some of the combat, but so the thing that makes Sleeping Dogs combat is so freaking dope is that it has environmental kills. So it's not just like, you're not just going up to someone and beating them up. You can then, like, if there's like an AC near like you can like take their head and shove it in. Like you can take things that are like, in the environment and use them for combat, and it's so intuitive. It feels like you're in an action movie. There's also like really cool scripted kind of events, but there's one moment in the story particularly that like it's a wedding scene, I'll say, that's all I'll kind of say, that got me so good. Like I was like so invested. I was like, holy shit, this is what works for me. This game like pushed itself above that kind of like the regular 7 out of 10. But I think what's fundamentally, there is a lot of 7 out of 10 aspects to the game. I think budgetary restrictions kind of play a thing into it as well, and how the game was kind of tossed around for a while in a state of limbo, with it was going to be a different game of a different name, and then it wasn't. And then Treyarch, fun fact, originally came up with the idea of Sleeping Dogs, like that the original pitch for Sleeping Dogs came from Treyarch, and then Activision was like, no, you go back to Black Ops, and then they're like, okay, yes, and then they didn't make this game. So yeah, it's a whole trip, but the definitive edition of Sleeping Dogs, I absolutely recommend. It is, if you're in that mood for an open world game, and the one that you can actually focus on, not just like shits and giggles, not just driving around in GTA Online. It's awesome. And from the chat, Sleeping Dogs is amazing. Haven't played it in a minute, but I think 7 is fair. Yeah, 7 is fair. It's just that then, on top of that, everything else kind of really adds and kind of cemented it as one of my favorite 7 out of 10s for me.
Yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I've played it, several years at this point, so I don't remember exactly if the game has a lot of the more modern open world things where it's like, a lot of the checklist kind of design. So I won't put like a stamp on it that it's saying that this game doesn't have it, but I will say I don't remember it having
Sure.
a lot
Yeah.
of that stuff. So if you're looking for an open world game that's, you know, maybe a bit more focused, something like a Mafia or something like that, I feel like
Sure.
Sleeping Dogs kind of
You could,
scratched
yeah,
that
it's a
same
kind of a middle ground
itch.
because you do have like, you can, buy apartments and kind of move in and buy cars and that kind of thing. Like you can actually feel
Mhm.
yourself moving up in life through the narrative. But then, yeah, I think ultimately like the character work is surprisingly compelling for me. And so by the end of it, I was kind of invested. There's rumors for so long about Sleeping Dogs 2, and
Mhm.
I don't even know. I think that's one of the hardest things, by the way, about a 7 out of 10 game is that when you try to like make it a sequel, you're not going to succeed because even if it's a 7 out of 10 again, it's rarely going to meet the same like expectations or whatever.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the initial 7 out of 10 stuff comes from like the surprise of being like, oh shit, this is just 7 out of 10, but like I'm really into this. You
Mhm.
rarely get that. So I think a lot of times 7 out of 10 sequels get like 5, 6 out of 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that happens, or you
Or
get
9,
the
or they just they're
situation.
just perfect.
There's that, or it's like I feel like what you'll see also is it will get a sequel, but like 15 years later,
Yeah,
like
sure. Yeah.
something like Rage and Rage 2. I feel like there's like a massive time difference between those games. Maybe I'm just remembering that
No, no,
wrong,
you
and
are
it's a
correct.
lot shorter. But
No, Starfield.
yeah,
Sorry. The Jesus Christ, I'm blanking. It is like a long gap, and so much so that they lost, like Rage lost the thing that made like its DNA almost, because like the thing when you picture when I say Rage on the 360, the things that
mhm.
come to mind is like dirty, like
Desert.
gray and John Goodman. Those are the only two things that come to mind to me. And the
Mhm.
second one, it's
Pink.
vibrant and no John Goodman. So it's on every account. You've missed the target. You know what I mean? It's not the same. But
Mhm.
no, yeah, Rage is definitely one of those. I could definitely see. Uh, Nick, I'm gonna go for the second game because I think we're gonna do a snake format. So then
Sure.
you'll go too. I said it accidentally, so I'm just gonna get it out, rip the band-aid. Nick, Starfield, I think is a 7 out of 10
I
game.
Sri, I was gonna tell you when you asked me what should we use for the thumbnail, I was like, I had a half of a thought where I was like, we could do Starfield, like
I think
honestly.
Starfield is look, I know there's improvements and changes and updates that they've made. I haven't played any of those. So for me, I'm just speaking on what it was at launch. Starfield was very much so a 7 out of 10 game with how certain things, like there wasn't maps like the cities didn't have maps when it launched. Weird, some kind of like quality of life stuff that could be improved, and then they're also like, actually, this is part of the Bethesda DNA. And look, I'm a Bethesda shill, so I totally understand it. But and I think it works for me. Like I enjoyed it, but it's still,
Hmm.
I have to, like, whenever I'm talking to someone about Starfield and they're like, yeah, I was good, but like also like this kind of sucked, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. I could totally see like how so I could see how certain aspects or elements of the game, including like some of the way the map traversal is, or that kind of thing, can be underwhelming, or a little bit disappointing. But that being
Hmm.
said, those peaks that the game sometimes hits, where it's these interactions of going to places or seeing things that are like feel so uniquely like to part of my story. And you know there's parts of like the game that I've seen that like Nick had doubled my playtime and had not seen until like 60 hours in or whatever. And so that
Hmm.
kind of thing that like feels like, okay, this is the narrative that I've built, and I'm huge into that, like getting into the headspace of the characters, especially recently. Whenever I play an RPG, I'm like, okay, I have to play like the character type of thing. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think Starfield, look, one of my favorites of last year, but 7 out of 10, I think.
I'm gonna stake my BGS fan flag in this hill, and obviously, I think that honestly, and I'm trying to put my bias aside here.
Yes, go for it.
I think still Bethesda games and Starfield in particular, I think are the most overhated games in the industry. Like
Yeah.
yes, exactly what we're talking about. Like I very much enjoyed my time with Starfield. It was the exact game that I was expecting it to be, and that everybody should have expected it to be.
Yep.
Like, people get, super run away with the expectations for these games for some reason. And then like
It
we
comes
find
out.
ourselves in
Yeah.
this situation here where it's like, 5,000 video essays months after the game's out where it's like, that game was bad, right? And it's like
An honest conversation about Starfield. It was kind of bad.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
8 hours later, right? Like they are some of the most overhated games.
Yeah.
I will say. At the same time, I completely agree with what you were talking about. Like, Starfield, for every good thing that I can say that I enjoyed about it, I equally have a bunch of things that I'm like, yeah, that was kind of dumb. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have done that. My beloved 76, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
I am probably among me and my friend Declan that play 76 together. I am extremely critical and harsh on 76. I still play it a lot, and like I like the game, right? But it's like there are several areas, if we want to circle back into Starfield and not take the 76 route here,
Sure.
like I just think that I love the art direction of Starfield. I love the character, like the dialogue stuff that they did with it. A lot of people, don't love the locked in camera perspective and everything, and they've changed that with recent updates, but like weirdly, like that's what I was looking for. It was like I don't love how Skyrim handles the dialogue where it's like off to the side and like, not really portraited. Like there's a charm to that locked in Bethesda camera angle that like I wanted them to go with. So it's like, I see people all the time that are just like, yeah, it was so bad. Like that dialogue, that camera, it's just like, oh, it's so stupid, Oblivion ass looking dialogue camera. And it's like, but that's what I wanted. And it's like, I don't get it. So yeah,
well, I think this is more for you to speak on because I haven't played this game. I think part of this, as we were having this conversation, I thought of it. It wasn't part of my list. But do you think Outer Worlds is a 7 out of 10?
I could see a lot of the same arguments that people have with Starfield. Maybe not the same arguments, but yes, I could definitely see a lot of people say Outer Worlds is a 7. I would probably also be one of those people, honestly.
Hold on, let me look at my ID. Yeah, I am one of them.
Yeah, very similar to Starfield. I really enjoyed Outer Worlds, and it seems like Outer Worlds was kind of like marketing wise, it was like kind of the perfect storm, right? You have Obsidian coming off of, well, not coming off of New Vegas, but like, they weren't shy about saying the developers of Fallout New Vegas in all of the trailers, right?
Yeah.
And so
coming off of Grounded, okay, we're being honest. Coming off Grounded.
You have Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky of, two of the main creators of the original games coming in with a new space RPG that has gameplay that's very familiar to people that played New Vegas and everything. And it's like, yeah, I liked a lot of that stuff. I love the dialogue. I liked the gameplay. I thought it was, a little jank, but again, I was kind of expecting that, kind of like New Vegas. And I think in the years since the Outer Worlds, it's kind of in a weird spot. Like I watched Tim Kaine. He has his own YouTube channel where he talks about stories and everything of his career. And he's talked about the Outer Worlds. And I think he said that Outer Worlds is his most successful game as far as like sales and players and everything. But like weirdly, the community, I feel like if you were to ask like, where's Outer Worlds on the heat meter, a lot of people would say it's like kind of like a 7 out of 10. Like it was good, but kind of forgettable experience. So
damn, yeah. Okay, so go hit me with one of your 7 out of 10s. I mean, I see them.
I'll hit you with a 7 out of 10 that I gave a 7 out of 10, Sri, and that's Payday 3.
Oh, okay. I could definitely. I mean, look, you can go read Nick's thoughts on it on RespawnStation.com, but quick
Payday
and dirty.
3. I mean. Yeah, so that review obviously is,
early.
reviewed in the launch window
Yeah,
of that
early
game,
on.
which was probably one of the worst launches of last year. Um,
I've
just
heard. That's
colossal
why I play the
failures.
real Payday, Crime Boss, Rocket City.
Oh, trust me, it's a talking point in the community. But this is one of those interesting ones where it's like it's a 7 out of 10, but it's a type of game and experience that I realistically can't really get anywhere else. And we talked about it the other week when you were playing Crime Boss again. And it's like Crime Boss is very similar to Payday as far as gameplay goes, but
Mm.
the vibes are just so night and day different to me. Where it's like Payday, like it is like it's about the suits, it's about the sneaking around, it's about the Heat style action gunfights, it's about the loading up bags of cash or jewelry behind, censored glass that's bulletproof, right?
Right.
And it's this kind of vibe. The music plays into it where it feels like it's just so unique to Payday, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I really like the heist genre, and a big part of why I like it is the Payday games. And it's like even at the time when I was playing Payday 2, when that first came out,
Yeah.
GTA 5 was relatively new, and like heists are a big component of that game. But it's like even a GTA 5 heist and a Payday heist like are very different.
Yeah.
Uh Aesthetically, gameplay wise,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
the list goes on. So it's funny because it's like I have a level 100 character in Payday 3. Like I played a lot of that game,
Yep.
and I've installed it, and I'm picking away at it bits and pieces here. They just released a new heist, and it's like maybe I want to buy that and play that, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like Payday 3. It has a lot of issues. It still has a lot of issues. They are fixing things and they are adding new content, obviously. So there's things to like here. And I do think that the gameplay, the like shooting gameplay, is like good. Like it's not bad. I would say Payday 2's shooting is bad. Like
Right.
it's using an engine that was designed for racing games, I think originally or something. Like it's
Oh,
really
dang.
the diesel engine is really jank. Like I'm gonna be honest. And so like at least Payday 3 actually plays like a kind of modern shooter
Mm-hmm.
would. It's just like, there's a lot of work that I think needs done to make the game like really kind of reach the same heights that Payday 2 reached.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of those ones where it's just like I fully realize people's, aggressions against it, and I myself also I gave it a 7 out of 10 when I reviewed it. So it's just like I think it's one of
And
those perfect
I think this is,
example
I
of
mean, before you go to your next title, but I think this is, again, a good point of comparison because, for example, we're talking about our favorite 7 out of 10 games, right? That's the context. Nick reviewed Payday 3, gave it a 7 out of 10, but he also gave a 7 out of 10 to 12 minutes. Nick, would you say that that is up here? Do you think I think, just knowing you, I don't think this is on the same place as Payday 3, just because it's a 7 out of 10. It's on the same, it's the same metric, but it doesn't hold the same amount of water.
That's that's interesting because you know what?
Oh,
Maybe proving the point that I'm about to say. I honestly kind of forgot that I even played 12 minutes
there it
until you just
is.
brought that up.
There it is.
So it's funny. In the technical aspect of a 7 out of 10, yes, I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would put it in this list because it has that more like 5 or 6 out of 10 energy where it's like
Sure.
I played it and it's like I experienced that game,
Yeah.
but
It slips your mind, though. I mean, if it doesn't leave an lasting impact, that's what a good 7 out of 10 does. It leaves an impact, sticks with you. So
if
what's
I
your
had
next
to
one?
say something, I'd say like the cast from 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Like Willem Dafoe was in it, and I remember that. But
Willem Dafoe, James McAvoy, and Daisy Ridley, I think.
yeah, that was a
Oh, there you go.
star-studded cast for that game.
Yep. All right. What's your next one?
I'll go with Tony Hawk's Project 8 for my next one.
Okay. All right. Hit me with it.
I am a Tony Hawk fan. I don't know how much I've said that on the podcast. I feel like you've mentioned it once or twice.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the Tony Hawk games, and I was looking at Tony Hawk games, they kind of go in different eras, right? There's the original era of like, 1 through 4 more or less, where like it was this new thing. It was gaining a lot of popularity. It was, Activision, one of their biggest franchises. Um and it was like, exciting every entry.
Yep.
Then we get into the PS2 and like Xbox GameCube era, where you have things like Underground 2. I mean, Pro Skater 3 and 4 were on that generation also. But like the jump away from the numbers, I guess we'll say. So you have like your Underground 2, American Wasteland, and that's kind of, I think, where a lot of people put like the peak of the series, specifically Underground and Underground 2. And then you get into the like 360 gen, and we get a game like Project 8 and Proving Ground. And this is when Tony Hawk realized that they had to change something up in the jump to HD visuals, and they started messing with like mechanics and things like that. And Project 8 occupies this really kind of like weird spot where it's a hilarious thing in historical context also, because do you know what the point of Project 8 is?
No, I don't.
So Project 8 is basically a in-universe parallel to MySpace, because MySpace allowed you to have like, I think it was top 8 people.
Wow.
I never used MySpace.
Okay.
That was a little bit before me.
Yeah.
But that is essentially what the Project 8 is that you're doing skate challenges to try to rank up and get on Tony Hawk's Project 8, like his top 8.
I see.
And you get text messages on Motorola flip phones and stuff like that. So just like, vibe wise, it's a very interesting point in like early to mid 2000s history.
Yeah.
But also like the gameplay, like it feels kind of like old Tony Hawk, but they're starting to change like physics and things like that. So it also feels a bit different. The character models look like kind of gross, honestly. Like they're humans, and you can tell they're humans, but just like the way that either the mouths move or like the skin looks, like everybody looks like they got some like diseases going on or something. And yeah, it's a game that like, I have memories of playing it and everything, and I wouldn't say it's a bad game. Any of the Tony Hawk developed games by Neversoft, like I enjoy playing them, but it definitely is no Tony Hawk's Underground or Pro Skater 2 and 3, and it's definitely not, the dumpster fires that were the Robomoto games. So,
oh boy. All right. I'll stick with the theme for the next two, both horror. The first is, and I'm going to do newer ones because I think I was kind of, as I was compiling this list, I realized that I kept leaning towards games that are like from the PlayStation 3 era, like even Sleeping Dogs. Even though I played the definitive edition, it's a PS3 game. Like it came out PS3 360. From chat, Austin says American Wasteland is one of his favorites. Whoa. And obviously for Austin,
I that kind of recently. It's a great one. I like it.
I think if anything, this the thumbnail with Borderlands is was the bait for Austin. So all right, the first one on my horror duo is Resident Evil 3 Remake. I think it is. I know it makes sense because, like, look, it's so similar to Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 2 is fucking awesome. So Resident Evil 3, you'd think, would also be a home run. But I think that there's certain creative, as I punch my mic, there's certain creative liberties that it takes. There's certain kind of deviances here and there. And while the game fidelity-wise still looks awesome, it's like this weird, almost DLC-like, it's like 6 hours long or something like that. And while it can certainly be intense, it never, I think, reaches quite those peaks of Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil Village or 7 for me. And at the same time, it's not bad. It's still like, it's it's in this new generation of Capcom, it's like one of their weaker titles, but like, man, Capcom at their weakest is still killing it compared to some, anyone else kind of working in the business right now. So yeah, Resident Evil 3 Remake. The next one I think is a little bit controversial, and I probably wouldn't have said this before if you asked me a few months ago, but now that I'm replaying the game, I think it's I've kind of solidified it. It's Callisto Protocol. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
that is a 7 out of 10 right
Absolutely, it
there.
is. I initially was like really brushed off the game, but then I started replaying it, and like from the start, brand new, fully locked in, and I listened to the podcast just to really get myself in the headspace for it too. And there are so many things that the game is a little weird or wrong with, but also I think that the combat is actually fun. Like I know people were like, "Oh, this combat is weird," like. And I was probably one of those people when the game first came out, and I didn't give it the time of day. Getting hands on it, it feels so awesome. I mean, it's like the way you dodge, it's like so satisfying. I don't know why. And it's one of those things where like I'll find myself in like surrounded by like 7 bad like alien mutated creatures, and I can still have a chance of making it out of it alive. So it loses some of the horror aspect of it that way, but man, it's still, I think that like the sound design is top notch. It's the visually, like again, it's on par with fidelity wise with like some of the Resident Evil games. And while it might not be like the Dead Space rebirth spiritual successor that people might have been hoping for, I think that it's still like, I mean, it still scratches a horror itch. There's definitely some spooks in there for sure.
Yeah, I still haven't played Callisto Protocol. I want to get to it, but like I think the gameplay is like that perfect, focus point that we're trying to find with each of these games, where it's like they definitely tried something new with that like more melee specific combat. I think everybody watching the trailers and everything was thinking this might just be Dead Space again, which is more of a shooter, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have all the visuals and the vibes and everything going for the game. I can't really speak to the writing or anything, but like the gameplay,
sure.
it's that one thing that they tried to take a leap with, and
yeah,
some people liked it, some people didn't.
Hey, did they need to get people to look at viscera and like black dark web fucking gore? I'm not sure, but
right,
what's there works for the most part.
The Resident Evil 3 thing I think is also interesting because I feel I wasn't there at the time, getting the discourse of the original Resident Evil 2 and 3, but from what I've heard from other people, it seems like the game almost went through the exact same criticisms when it originally came out, because it was it was a quick release after Resident Evil 2 using, reused assets and everything, sort of similar to what it was with the remakes, and like Resident Evil 2 was just so leagues above what 3 accomplished, even like that. Yeah, it would be very interesting to see. I feel like it would be the same discussion whether it was the originals or the remakes.
Yeah, I didn't actually think of it that way, but that's fair. All right, Nick, what's your next 2?
Do you want the shooter or do you want the open world game? Let's go with that.
Let's do shooter first.
Shooter, I put Call of Juarez Gunslinger.
100% agree. 100% agree. This is it fits the bill. I mean, look, it's one of those games. It's like poster child for this genre.
7 out of 10. Right? Yeah. It's still the only Call of Juarez that I've played. I think most of the others. I think I might maybe missing one of them, but this one stylistically is like, it's more of a cell shaded thing rather than it going for more like realistic visuals, and I think it elevates the gameplay that much more. It's a bit more arcadey. It's a bit more like basically like when you're shooting, desperados and cowboys and stuff, you're getting like giant like point multipliers and stuff flashing on the screen. So it's very overtly arcadey. It's a bit faster paced, but I think there's, some representation things that are, a bit problematic about the game in some of the other games.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a healthy layer of jank in the game. There's definitely some
expected.
Some lower budget going on in the gameplay department. And some people would say like, the visuals might be playing into the lower budget as well. Like they went with a more stylistic approach because it might have been easier. I know certainly the cutscenes, they're like, kind of storybook-esque. So like we've mentioned with some of the other ones, there's definitely some budgetary things going on with this game. But when I did play it, like it was pretty fun. And, if I'm looking for like something quick Western themed that I can get into, and like I don't have to install 100 gigs for Red Dead 2, like Call of War as Gunslinger might be one that I would pop back into again.
Real quick from chat, has LA Noire been brought up yet? Definitely deserves to be here. No, I have not played.
We have not brought it up.
I have not played LA Noire. I do own a copy. I own it on the machine that Rockstar intended for it to be played, the Nintendo Switch. So I've not yet played it. Yeah, I've not yet played it, but I do own a copy of LA Noire.
I played the 360 version and I played the remastered version that they put out. And
okay. Is it?
I would agree. Okay. It's definitely.
Oh, I think Oh, sorry. Don't not to cut you off.
I was just gonna say that like it's a good game, but like I could definitely see a lot of arguments for it being a 7 out of 10. Like,
yeah,
it's definitely not like GTA or Red Dead.
Is that it's like a lot of times 7 out of 10 games. Another thing we can add on to it, and if we haven't already kind of hammered it in already or colored it in, whatever you want to say, is they often have some original quirk or idea that like the whole game hinges on it. You know what I mean? And for LA Noire, it's that facial like animation. It's like never done before in this in the industry. So that there's always you could probably go back to a lot of these games and find something that's like for Sleeping Dogs, it's like that the combat being like dynamic in terms of like environmental action. I'm trying to think of what else. Starfield is the entire thing. Starfield. That's just so there's these kind of like ambitious reaches that the games make, I'll say. Okay, what's your
LA Noire, real quick, I want to say it's kind of a game that's like the gift that keeps on giving, though, also. Because like at the time, the facial, capture stuff is like really impressive. And to a certain degree, it still is. But like we still get, clips being posted every once in a while of like that one old guy that's like clearly lying. And he's just like, ooh.
Like, I wonder.
Like, like you start to see the areas where like it's very overt, and like some of the responses that Cole can give for like certain things is like that game is just a gem that definitely keeps delivering even all these years later. My last one is the Saboteur.
Another one I agree with. And you know what? Here's a fun fact for you guys. Old Nick over here used to have review games on his own before we brought him on, and I remember watching his review for Saboteur and being like, "This son of a bitch! I gotta work with him." And you know what? Here we are. But anyway, that's how I found out about Saboteur. There you go.
Saboteur is a open world game set in World War II.
Yeah.
And it's developed by Pandemic Studios, who developed the Star Wars Battlefront games, the originals, also Destroy All Humans that we talked about recently.
Yeah.
Games like Full Spectrum Warrior and some other stuff too. Like they occupied a very similar space that I would say that Neversoft did with Activision, kind of like AA kind of interesting things. And Saboteur was interesting because part of the game, it's an open world game. It's you're driving around kind of like GTA and stuff. But it's like black and white until you like liberate certain areas, if I remember right, and it reintroduces color back, or it's like, I think you actually have to like liberate areas.
And then it gets color.
The city, and it gets the color back. So there's this interesting color swap mechanic, but like, we've kind of touched on it on a bunch of the other games. Like there's a little bit of jank in the gameplay. It's not quite as tight as you want in the shooting. The driving's not quite as, responsive as you want. The writing, I remember being like a sore spot for me. I remember it being like not very good at all. So, that's, here, neither here nor there, but it's like how many other open world,
World
War II games
stylized too?
Not really any. Yeah.
Wow, I mean, you've flown through your list. I have a few stragglers, but here's a last kind of topic I'll mention that maybe is a little kind of side note to this whole conversation. And I don't really know if we have the time to unpack this whole thing, because I think this will give us introduce a whole new subgenre of games that we could talk about. So we're not going to go deep dive into it. But sure. Eurojank games live in that 7 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10, like in that range. But I think that if there's a community that has embraced the 7 out of 10s, like accepting that a game is not perfect, understanding even before you go into a game that there are shortcomings, but just being like, I'm here to love you anyway. You know what I mean? That's Eurojank. That's the games that like Piranha Bytes and company make with the likes of Gothic or Elix or anything like that. So, like I said, we don't have time to really delve into it, but I think that genre. I mean, Biomutant, that's one Nick has played in the past. That lives in that area, and again, it really depends on like if it comes at the right time, if you can accept it. Some people can't. Some people will play Eurojank game and be like, "What this is trash." I could totally understand it, but at the same time, there's some people who like live and die by like they won't pick up a GTA 5, but they'll be there day one for one of these kind of games. You know what I mean? So interesting one to throw in there. Little side topic. But with that said, I have a few games to run through, and I'm not going to spend too much time on them just because we've talked about some of these quite a bit. So let's do 2 games. I'll pair them up. There's 2 games that I think 7 out of 10s. That are console exclusives to their own, and look, I got no home, I mean, that sounds fucking bad. I got no alliances, okay? So I have one PlayStation and one Xbox. So Xbox. I'll start with actually Nick. Which one do you want, PlayStation or Xbox?
Let's do Xbox.
Okay, Xbox One launch title, Rise: Son of Rome.
Oh, baby.
I played that recently. I didn't play it when it first came out, but like 2 years ago, I went back and played it, and I was like, wow, this hits this mark. I mean, it's super. For that game, if you were talking about like the thing that is like, oh, what are they trying to do? It's the visual fidelity. It's like they're really trying to sell you on the fact that this Xbox One can put out a lot of power. And 2, it's this really interesting combat where it's like minimal UI and like the attacks and everything are pretty much like color coded to the Xbox buttons, so you kind of know that way how to react. Really interesting. Wasn't a huge fan of the story, but like it really was like this. It had this momentum of being. It was also a short game, 8 hours, I think, but it had this momentum that you're like, you got to kind of get swept away with it and kind of get lost in it. And speaking of getting lost in it, there's a PlayStation game. Nick, can you guess what this is? It's very similar to Rise: Son of Rome, so that's why there's a chance you might be able to guess.
It's one that I think I considered putting on here also. Order 1886.
Hell yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
The Order 1886. Again, I don't want to say shtick in a bad way, but like what it's trying to do is this like super cinematic black bars on top and bottom, like it's one of my high school or college films, but it has werewolves. It has this really cool lore that they develop. I will say werewolves is a plus point for me, so that's automatically on the list. But yeah, just like the way that this game develops its world and sets the stage is so interesting that I'm honestly a little bit disappointed, if anything, that we haven't seen anything else from it. But I also think that I don't think the game did that well, so I don't think it'd be foolish to expect there to be something else, especially when like there's a series in the PlayStation library that have done well and have not received a sequel. So you can't hope for all of them to have sequels. But again, we talked about it before. Go ahead.
Order 1886 is interesting for me because like the visuals, I played it a couple years back, and the visuals, I would argue, are still better than some games that come out today. And it's like, that was a really long time ago. Like, I'm not sure if that was exactly launch window or not, but
close to, yeah.
It was
but
early
yeah, I mean,
in
Santa
PS4.
Monica was working on, right? That was Santa Monica, I believe. They were...
it's Ready at Dawn.
Ready at Dawn, sorry. Yes. And Santa Monica. But still, Ready at Dawn. They were working, I mean... the visual fidelity of that game is so impressive. Playing through it, it's
The other thing I wanted to say was that Sri, I've been critical of Sony's modern game design.
How dare you?
With the the over the shoulder third person with a companion kind of
Yeah.
gameplay that a lot of the games do. Weirdly enough, Order 1886, if we ever got a sequel, that is one game that I would actually like that gameplay, I feel, to be applied to.
Sure.
Like, I
Right.
feel like that world and that lore that they built up and
It feels
everything
fitting.
would be much better fit to a game of that style than just like a Gears of War corridor.
I think Ready at Dawn is now making like VR games, so if anything, we're going to see a VR sequel to the Order 1886. I mean, I'm ready for it.
They're owned by like Meta, I think.
Oh, really?
Like,
that makes sense. That makes sense. They are. Last I know, I remember them being very. I don't know why I said Santa Monica, but yeah, I remember them being very into VR.
The chances of it are small, but yeah, it is something that I would like to see in the future. Right. I think.
So last two games again. I'm gonna mention them quickly because we don't have all day. Need for Speed 2015. I mean, look, that chuckle. No, Nick agrees. The thing that it tries to do differently, I would say the live action cutscenes it's shtick. And I will say it's a shtick for sure in Need for Speed because it's so weird. It has like a cast. Like I remember last year, or maybe the year before that, I was watching the show Andor, the Star Wars show, and one of the actresses from Need for Speed is in it. I was watching. I was like, why does this lady look so familiar to me? And I looked her up on IMDb, and I was like, Need for Speed, of course, that's what she's from. But yeah, it's goes for these weird cutscene ideas that is just full of just like chugging Monster Energy drinks and fist bumping a whole bunch of people. Like everyone you see here is fucking fist bumping them. But it's still super fun. I mean, it's Need for Speed. It's like it has that core Need for Speed gameplay. So you could easily kind of just spend a lot of time with it. And I believe I got the platinum for it too. So it's definitely one of those. Yeah. Oh, I think 7 out of 10 games you can also grind. I think I think some of these open world games, especially that get to 7 out of 10, I think you can grind a little bit. And I say that as a segue to my last 7 out of 10, and this is one of my personal favorites for a long time. It's Prototype 2. I went back to the PS3. It's one of those. I actually have this like cool freaking sleeved cover edition of the game too. Prototype 2, I haven't actually played Prototype 1. I've heard a lot of people recommend that I go back to play it, but Prototype 2 is so, again, it's similar to the idea of Sleeping Dogs in terms of this open world game, but it's much more, not Saints Row either. It's not open world in terms of like you feel like you're in a living world. It's open world and it's like almost like Spider-Man. You're not going into buildings or anything like that. It's closer to Spider-Man. It's like a superhero open world game. But it's you can grind in it. I think that the kind of the not symbiote, but whatever it is like that your character is kind of possessed with, that gameplay mechanic is what Prototype 2 kind of does differently. It's like it's the main attraction. It takes itself a little bit too seriously at times, but I think that's part of the charm of it as well. So yeah, Prototype 2, last game that I wanted to mention. There's I mean, I kept it to games that I played that I can kind of speak to, but like, I mean, there's Mad Max, for example, that again, also from 2015, I think also another very fitting 7 out of 10 game, but yeah, that's the list of our favorite 7 out of 10 games. Thanks to everybody who watched live, who shared some of their 7 out of 10 favorites. Obviously, we're going to speak to thumbnail. I mean, Borderlands, also a big one. I think Borderlands probably is one of the rare few games where the first one, I do think 7 out of 10. I have played it, and like I think it fits that range. But then I think Borderlands 2 outdoes itself, and so it's kind of like a steps it up, and I think even kind of doubles down on some of the things that they experimented with in the first game, like some of the things that were maybe notable in the first game, like the guns and all that stuff. They were like, well, if you like guns, we got more guns for you.
Yeah.
And so I haven't played Borderlands 3 at all, but I have played Borderlands 1 and 2 to speak to it, at least that much. Probably about 2 hours of Borderlands 2 that I've played. So, but
Borderlands 1 will be an interesting one because I feel like there's been rumors that they're maybe remaking that one. So that'd
It would
be
make. I
interesting
mean,
to see
I
if
don't
they
know if
put
it'll
that
come out
under a new
any
lens.
time in time for the movie that's coming out, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like next month, that movie. Though I will say, I keep catching trailers of Borderlands on like in theaters. I keep watching the trailers, and the budget is like surprisingly high. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
they spent some money on it. I'm just hoping that they kind of land that ship. Is that a metaphor that makes sense for Borderlands? I don't know.
Yeah, land a spaceship.
Yeah.
That'll work.
There you go. Tales from the Borderlands. That's a good one. That's a Borderlands games I have played, and not a 7 out of 10. I think that's a good one. With that said, Nick, anything you have for? Actually, here's what I'm going to say, Nick. For this episode's Like This, Try That, I want you to plug one of your 7 out of 10 games.
I'm gonna plug No More Heroes 3 out of that.
As what?
I would
You have to
say
say if you like what.
If you like action games like Devil May Cry, or if you like if you like weeb wrestler people that are weebs and are obsessed with wrestling and Star Wars and Johnny Knoxville,
Wow,
played No More Heroes 3 and love it.
that's a hell of a recommendation. I'm gonna say if you like open world superhero games, albeit Marvel's Spider-Man or the Suicide Squad kills the Justice League, or anything in that vein, then I would recommend that you try Prototype 2. Understand, it is tonally much different. I believe it's a hard M. Like, the game is rated M for mature. It's very gory and bloody, but again, a really good time, and one that you can absolutely kind of like once you finish, go back to recover some credits or trophies. I mean, get some trophies and go for the platinum. With that said, Nick, man, we haven't had a tall episode like this in a few weeks. I'm glad.
I think we owed it to the listeners.
Yes. Thank you to everybody watching. Thanks for all the support on the show and on the channels. We really appreciate it. Again, if you want to check out our bite-sized video content, head over to Respawn Station TV on YouTube. If you want to watch us live, then you're in the right place, assuming you're watching us live. If you're listening to this later on a podcast service of your choice, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating. It goes a long way in making all the algorithms, our AI overlords, be like, oh, these people must be saying something relevant, because the AI is absolutely screwing us on the website. So we got to have AI work for us somehow. I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I think last episode we talked about it, or the episode before that. Just listen to all the episodes. You'll hear us talk about it eventually. But with that said, that brings us to an end of episode 20. We are 2 episodes away from that big episode where we just, we're like, get handed the keys to the world or something like that. I'm not really sure. Again, I'll figure it out once I tell you guys, or I'll tell you guys once I figure it out. But with that said, Nick, thanks for chatting with me, buddy. I appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed as well. Do you have anything else to say for the people before?
I hope that, if nothing else with our conversation here, we taught people to be a little bit more understanding of the 7 out of 10 and a little bit more accepting. Yes. Not all games have to be a 10 out of 10, and they don't need to be the best thing ever made. Sometimes it's okay to do something a little bit different and be a little janky when we get to that point.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. With that said, people, as always, thanks for watching. Remember, boopons are a thing. And until next time, have a good night, a good morning, and a damn good time.